All right, welcome everyone. Dr. Anthony Criniti IV here, also known as Dr. Finance. You're on the Dr. Finance Live podcast. We've got an incredible guest today. Folks, just stop what you're doing right here. This is the 100th episode of this podcast. We've had 100 superstars come through here. This is incredible today. Don Hobbs, we've got an incredible man. We're going to tell you all about him. He was the former president of Success Magazine, one of the top magazines out there in the entrepreneurial world, self-help world. He was also an incredible person who's in the real estate industry space of Hobbs and Herder. It was a giant real estate advertising company. He was Jim Rohn's student. I mean, we have a whole list of stuff we're going to talk about. So, I mean, he's an incredible person in the self-development world, real estate world. So, Don, welcome, Don, to our podcast. You're 100th episode, man. How are you today?
100 episodes. Congratulations. I'm so happy to be here. Dr. Finance, awesome to be with you. And thanks for including me in this. This is a big deal to get to 100 episodes, right? Most people never make it. It's a long haul, and you are on your way to building such a great following. So thank you for making me a part of it. Thanks, brother. Appreciate you.
And not your typical podcast. These interviews are generally over 2 to 3 hours of superstars, so it's like a full day dedicated to each one of these. So yes, you're right. So Don, the way we're going to do this, we'll start out with a quick snapshot of yourself, maybe 30 seconds, just to build up a little bit about yourself to our audience, and then we'll get into your story, maybe 20-30 minutes or so, and then I got about 20-25 questions for you, and then we'll round the bases. So that's the game plan for today. We can take a break anytime you want. These are long deep dives, so
that's awesome. Well, just to give a brief background, I've been in the business world for many years. Of course, I'm not a kid, but I started when I was a kid, 18 years old. I met Jim Rohn. You mentioned that. I was a student of his. Actually was with Jim's company for 8 years, last 2 as the president of his organization. But I've been in the business world for years and years, and most of it revolved around either the betterment of agents, personal real estate agents, personal development, skills, mindset, just, how do we get people to their performance? And I love watching people's lights go on when they get it, whatever it is for them, because everybody's on their own journey. And so for me, it's always been about, making sure people get what they need to go from where they are to where they want to be. And I've done that through a lot of different mechanisms. I've been, was Gary Keller's business partner for a while, and Keller Williams, of course. We've built a very large real estate company ourselves. We've got done that twice. I built 3 coaching companies in the real estate space. So a lot of it is just really revolving around people's somewhere between enlightenment and empowerment. So that's kind of been my deal for years and years.
That's incredible. Thank you, Don. Appreciate you. And we're gonna definitely get to touch on a lot of things. What I admire most about you is that you're not just one fixed path of success. You have multiple paths of success, and you have this commitment to continue that record by constantly doing what most people are uncomfortable doing, change, and finding ways to adapt to the new environment. I really admire that a lot about you. So let's try to figure out how you got to this point, though. Obviously, standing right here, your success, but I know that from interviewing all these folks, it never was exactly the way we see them today. There was always something. Never, right, Don? Like it never shows up the way you see him today.
The road is never that smooth, no, it's never that way. I mean, it's kind of like an airplane though, Dr. Finance. It's, you take off and you got a destination in mind, and, you're vectoring around storms and whatever. It's never a straight line path, right? And probably the biggest thing that helps people get where they want to go, which is, a great lesson for anybody watching this or listening to this, is, you're going to go through stuff. We call it life and circumstances, and it's not always smooth, and yet it's part of the deal. I was watching a basketball game. I used to live in Los Angeles for most of my life, and during that time, I was a big Lakers fan, and so I remember watching the Lakers 29 points down, and they came back to win the game. And what you realize is it's a long game. It's 60 minutes. It doesn't matter whether you're up or down all the way through, except where you end up. Like, so you're down, you're up, there's lead changes, there's good shots, there's bad shots, there's, the energy's down, the momentum's low, the momentum's high. And that's life. I mean, that's really what our game is all about. You just can't quit. And you've got to keep moving forward. Failing forward is probably the best way of saying it, because it's going to be filled with failure. And the one thing I know, because we've been so involved in the coaching space, is that what it really revolves around is how do we keep people closer to the straight line path versus making these big meandering, wandering, detours, because that's where we lose time. And in life, that's called years, months, years, decades even, right? That we get off track, we were down. A lot of people lost a lot of momentum back in 2008, 9, and 10, right? It was the Great Recession, as we'll call it in history. And a lot of people got themselves the wind knocked out of them. Some have not still recovered. Others came back with a vengeance, right? Ready to go. And so that is part of our own chemistry, our own internal dialogue, a lot of that we have to talk to ourselves about. How do I get out of this and into something else? And so anyway, we'll delve into it, but that's really, I think, what it's all about, is how do we stay as close to the straight line path to success, which is not that easy. Just not that easy.
Yeah, absolutely, Don. And by the way, I got to apologize. I realized I started this whole, folks, I apologize if you couldn't hear me. My microphone wasn't on the first few minutes. So, Don, just real quick, were you able to hear that?
Yeah, I was.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
You were good.
It was about 2 feet away. All right. Well, thank you, Don. So Don, let's step back to the beginning of your journey. So you were born in California, I believe. Is that right? You want to tell us about that?
Yeah. So I was born below middle class home in Southern California, Los Angeles County. Was raised by two parents that were divorced. I had a pretty normal life. I was probably aggressive. I don't know, aggressive. I was probably very assertive from the early days. I love sports, love winning, love making money. I started doing things to do that at a very early age. I was actually like you have a golf pro. I was the pro at a trap and skeet shooting range in El Monte, California, which, was for a 16-year-old. I was a state champ. I was, in that field, and they made me the pro. And so, I kind of was ahead of my time, and loved nice things, loved winning, but I didn't come from a family that had that. I was kind of a outlier and only child, and mom didn't teach it to me. Dad didn't teach it to me. My mom loves me, and my dad, I suppose did too. He was not in my life for a lot of it, which was an interesting story in itself. And then, I got to the point where at 18 years old, mom had bought me a ticket to a seminar, and I went to go see Jim Rohn.
Oh,
And,
she's the one who
yeah,
she introduced you to that.
wow. She'd been introduced to him. She came home after seeing him, and she said, we were still, we'd bought a house together, and she came home and said, I saw this guy and he reminds me of you, which I think is really funny when you consider the wisdom of Jim Rohn and his age compared to me. And I was like, I think I remind you of him, right? I think that's what's going on. But anyway, she said, I bought you a ticket for next month and you're going to get to go. Well, of course, it was date night. So nobody at my age was excited about going to a seminar. And it wasn't until after I met Rohn that I was like, oh my gosh, this is how I want to think and live and all of that. And if anybody is listening to this and they're going, Jim who? It's ROHN Rohn. He's easy to find, very YouTubeable, and really the godfather of almost all personal development. When you consider this industry, Ziegler, him, Nightingale, there were some big names, but there was not many of them. There was only 3 or 4 or 5 people that really changed that industry. And he was one of them. So I was fortunate. I got to hang with him, asked him, complimented him, said, I want to do what you do, which was also strange. And like, who thinks like that? And then eventually within about 4 months, I was working for him. And that was quite the adventure. You became mentor, business leader, father figure, meeting him at 18, it wasn't a kid, but I was also very much in formation stage. So he was a big, big influence for me.
So you were in California most
Yeah.
of your youth, right?
Yeah, I was in California almost my whole life. I actually didn't move to Texas until I was 50 something. And
Oh, wow.
now we live in Puerto Rico. Alice and I have a home here. So yeah, it was mostly a California journey.
California dream. Well, here's the interesting footnote to what you told us so far. So, I mean, you grew up, in a situation where you didn't, when you grow up, and I grew up in South Philadelphia, 4 grandparents died broke. Most of the people in my family barely graduated high school, the older generation. Um, that wasn't the thing to do. Like the thing to do was work, go make money and help your parents pay the bills, right? Like, so you didn't have that kind of guidance, the proper guidance, but your mom probably recognized this, I'm guessing. And that's why she was out there mentally, maybe subconsciously looking for someone to help you with your journey. So she kind of maybe possibly, I'm just looking at it, maybe it was a gift to feed that back to you in recognition that, look, I don't have guidance, but I can give you this guy. Here, go to this seminar, and it changed your life. So she was on subconsciously she was on the task of helping you fill voids that you might have had. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, can you hear that okay? Can you hear
Yeah,
me okay?
sounds great.
Okay, great.
Beautiful
she
dog
was,
too.
I don't know that she was that aware. I think she saw an opportunity. She had a friend that was in Jim Rohn's company, and so that helped. But that was a unique way of thinking for us. We weren't as a family ever driven towards personal development. We were never in that world. It was never, Jim Rohn said, for things to change for you, you've got to change. And I was like, I think it's about my boss. I mean, it's like, I didn't have a clue. I really didn't have a clue. And so I think it was really Rohn that was my biggest influence. And early on, because I was there from age 18 to 26, it's a pretty big time in business for me to come out, in that way. And he was my framework. So while he wasn't a perfect man, he was an incredible human being and such a philosopher, and gave me so many ways of seeing life differently than I ever would have been exposed to had I not had that experience. And for that, I always appreciate my mom. She loves still watching me. She'll probably listen to the podcast. She'll, watch anything we've got on YouTube. She loves watching the stuff. So, she's my biggest fan. And this is not the way we grew up. And yet for her, it became a change in her life like it did for mine, right? It was a complete shift. Yeah.
Incredible. Thank you, Don. Appreciate that. All right. So Don, just stepping back a little bit, your first 10 years growing up in LA, what was it like struggling when you didn't have a lot of money? Can you tell us about those negative experiences? We're going to get to all the good stuff later, of course, but we want to find out about what you had to go through.
Dr. Finance, I think the interesting part about that, and I think there's an element of, if you're not aware, you don't know what you don't know. And I'll just say that I don't know that I sat there and thought, wow, I'm missing a lot of stuff. And I was around people that were, our parents were all the same parents. They were all struggling. It wasn't like I was raised in a rich neighborhood and we were the poor folks. And I looked up and went, wow, if only we had that. We had nobody to compare to. We were, we played street ball, baseball, football. I mean, it was, I don't know that there was anything about that. Went to school in a what is now a hugely tough neighborhood, but then was kind of becoming a tough neighborhood. And but we didn't see it that way. It was just our world. And so I will say that sports was probably my greatest, I won't say respite from the world, although it probably was. It took me out of a negative environment with my father, who was kind of a rageaholic. I said I didn't have much of a relationship with him. Sports kept me out and kept me thinking about winning and being my best. And so to some extent, that was my personal growth. That was my place. And I both excelled at trap shooting, which was my shotgun wielding, clay pigeon shooting, all that stuff, right? I'm a state champ. I was at 14, had won. And that was a rich man's sport. And, my grandfather was able to help me with that. But it was also an individual sport. So you get to go inside and think about, what is it that makes me work, and how do I stay focused in the moments when the moments are the moments, right? When that in that moment. And then of course, baseball, football, all the normal stuff that kids do. But I was pretty good at it until all the others kept growing and I didn't, and I wasn't Spud Webb. So it didn't work out well for me in the sports world, except that I loved it so much, right? I'm still a big fan of all things sporting. But I think that's probably where I grew up was no model for success except through the sporting world, what winning looked like, right?
How do you define success?
How do I define success?
Uh-huh.
And at this point in my life, I would say it's having the ability to do what I want, when I want, wherever I want, as much as I want, with whomever I want, wherever I want. It's probably a lot about freedom. And at that time, I'm sure I would have defined it through money. It would have been, how much do I make? How much do I have? What do I have? So, I think, we mature as we age, and we go, what's really important with who I want, with whoever I want, means friends, and, the beautiful blonde upstairs that, my dogs who are around here probably will bark at some point during the course of our time together. That's, to me, that's critical now, but I don't know that would have been the same emphasis at that time. In fact, when I look at my business history, I gave up a lot on the personal side in the name of business, in the name of making money.
Thank you, Don. And folks, we're going to revisit his last response. He was the president of Success Magazine, so we'll come back to that in a future question. So Don, the last interview we had was last episode 99. I interviewed Mike Crouppen last week. Mike is one of the top insurance guys out there. And he had a very interesting, very similar story. He said almost the same thing as you. He grew up in a poor area in Virginia. And I asked him the same question. He said, we didn't know the difference because everybody else was the same. And growing up in South Philadelphia, I concur with both of you. It's like it was our world. Like what else is to compare? I didn't leave the neighborhood, until I was probably 18 years old. So there's nothing else really to compare it to. So when people say, would you rather be rich? But it's all about the state of mind and your perspective at that moment, right? Because we're all constantly changing. Would you agree? Did I hit a deep question too early?
The best laid plans. I've got somebody who's decided to do something right outside my studio here.
Oh, okay.
So let's give you an edit point there for the future, and tell everybody that I'm going to hear that again. Tell me that I heard most of it, and then I got right when he's like running the thing up. What was the?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I was just saying that. So two, all three of us basically had the same situation growing up in relatively poor areas.
Yeah. I caught that.
Yep. We didn't really know. We didn't know that the worlds were basically that was our world, right? So.
No, I mean, that's what I think is true, is that, and that's where the question of growth comes up is, you've got to have a basic awareness, and, we have a level of awareness we're born with. We're born into a family, we're born into culture, we're born into religion, we're born into certain things. And this is normal for us. And we don't know any different. In fact, it's a whole different discussion, but, our religion is the best religion. Our city is the best city. Our whatever is the best whatever, because that's what we know, and that's what we stand for. That's only because we don't have more experience. We don't have more exposure. We don't have more general knowledge. And the more that we widen ourselves, that's why, I love the European families that their kids are traveling all summer. It's like, you think about the worldly experiences that they get and what they learn from self-confidence and being able to carry themselves and do all that stuff. That's not our culture here. In fact, in our modern, in this era, there's a lot of taking care of kids, and there's a little bit of entitlement. There's loads of conversation we could have around that. But I think that for a lot of us, we don't know what we don't know until somebody comes in, makes us aware, and we go, oh, I didn't know. I didn't know about that, right? And then suddenly, we have more to strive for, but we also have more to feel. If we're going to feel less than, we have more reasons to feel less than, because now compared to people, look where I am, right? And we do comparison a lot, right? I'm better than, or I'm less than, is a pretty normal comparison, and it's not healthy, because in either case, I'm not better than, nor am I less than, based on what somebody else does. I should be inspired by what other people have done before me that have raised the bar, and I can be inspired by people that have lost it, blown it. Rohn used to say, take a poor man out to lunch and ask him how he blew it so bad, right? I mean, just kind of, we can learn from both sides, success and failure.
Yeah, what was that quote that you said? I heard you on, it was another interview. I think it was Jim Rohn's quote. You were quoting it about certain people are a role model to look up to, but other people are an example of what not to be. Something like that.
Yeah, I generally what I remember is you're either living life as an example or as a warning.
That's it.
Right.
That's it.
And both are true. And that, in fact, my comments, I want to end today with something very special when we get to that point. But it has to do with that. It has to do with living as an example, not as a warning. Because we can, again, I'm a sports fan, so I just ruptured my Achilles earlier this year with playing tennis. And in tennis, the phrase that we used to use is you play up, right? You play up, you play to people better. And that's what makes you better. You play down and you get lazy, and you don't try as hard, and you're not focused. And so you lose your skills. And I think in life, we get by being around people that inspire us, and we are either an inspiration to others, or we allow people to play down. And that's part of the responsibility that we have, to be our best and show up in society as elevating everybody, right? When the tide rises, we all ships rise, and we're part of that happening. We're part of that culture, or we're part of the culture of failure. We're part of the culture of mediocrity. And unfortunately, I think there's a lot of that in our society today.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you, Don. Appreciate that. So, Don, we're going to move forward chronologically in time. Was there any other anything you want to talk about your businesses growing up, your entrepreneurial business? Were you a busboy, things like that? What else did you do?
I missed the busboy thing. The same day I accepted
missed the bus, huh?
I accepted the busboy job. The same day I accepted the pro at the pro shop thing. I was going to take this job, and the guy at the pro shop said, "We can't have you wasting your talents like that. We're going to hire you here." So it was talk about a sliding door moment. Did you ever see the movie Sliding Doors?
Maybe.
Movie with Gwyneth Paltrow, where she starts the day off and it runs to the tube, the train in London, and just makes it in. And then they do a whole retake of misses it. Just the door closes and she misses it. And the 2 days, they track both days. And in fact, I became president of Success Magazine, the first article they wrote about me was sliding door moments, where you have those, it's almost like the Y's in the road, right? The splits in the road. I could have this, but I that. If I'd done that, it would have been different than if I'd done that. And we have those moments all the time, and we don't recognize them always in the moment. It's just life. But when you look back, a lot of times you can see wow, what a difference maker that was. And I will say, not taking the busboy job versus taking the other one was a huge life changer for me. I swear.
It's like those books, Choose Your Destination. You start and you can go, all right, you want to run to the store, or do you want to go to the library? Book page 2 or page 12? Advance to whatever page you want.
Just like that. Just like that. Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Don. Appreciate that. So Don, then did you wind up going to college, or did you do any of that stuff?
I didn't. I got to 18. I was graduating from high school. I was a pretty big student. I was, good student. And I had a full ride scholarship to Stanford University, which is a great university in California. And I had a full ride scholarship to UC Irvine, which was right in my backyard. And I had found Rohn. And to be honest with you, I liked business. I just like business. And there was that part of me almost like leaving college sports a year early because I'm going to get in the draft and get rich quicker. And I just said, you know what, I want to go the business route, not the school route. So I never did. You know, in those early days at Jim Rohn's company, I didn't say this, and a lot of times people associate, but Tony Robbins was there. You know, I started with Rohn when I was 18. Tony came along 3 months later at 17 years old. So we were together there. And you watched more than just the two of us. There were some other big names that came out. Herbalife was kind of formed in that environment as well. But it's interesting because when you think about, you know, the influence of this group, Tony didn't go to college. I didn't go to college. Mark Hughes didn't go to college. A lot of these people didn't. It was almost like we got into business, and that was our college. That was our school. And it's not the school of hard knocks. Yeah,
Sorry,
go ahead.
sorry to interrupt you. This is just completely changes the whole story. Did you say you had a full ride scholarship to Stanford?
Yeah.
Wow. So I'm just thinking out loud, like Jim Rohn really, if I was him, the fact that you went that route and you took a gamble with him when you had a full ride scholarship to Stanford, that's like, that would have made him feel like really good that you decided to choose him in that path. I mean, I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. Like, I know as an academic, I would have really have apprecited that if I was a Jim Rohn.
Yeah. I don't even think I ever said it to him. I don't even think it was ever a comparison or like, hey, I didn't go to school so I could join you. It's like, for me, it was like my life path. It just felt like the right thing to do.
Wow.
I loved it. I loved every minute of it. I loved what we did. I loved what we were teaching. I loved what we were saying. I loved speaking in front of groups. And of course, at 18, 19, I was just trying to get some clothes to be able to go and teach and be in front of people and say these important things and watch people's lights go on. And then when you'd see that happen, I'd be like, I love this. I mean, it just fed me. And, you know, it wasn't an instant overnight success for sure, but it was a different route. And of course, I remember being cocky about it when I was like maybe 21. I think it was 21. I made $100,000 that year, which would have been back in the late 70s. So again, 100 grand, 6 figures, right? It's a lot of money.
It's like $1 million a year now.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a chart somewhere that shows what the dollar was worth versus now, but it was a lot. And I remember saying probably out loud, cocky, you know, justifying, you know, I got friends that are still in school and I'm already making, they're going to become dentists so they can make less than I'm making now. Right. And there was an element of cockiness in that whole thing. And you know, again, it was young success. I didn't have my philosophy behind it all, but I think that was an interesting time because I didn't go to school. And I recognized that personal development was my school, that Rohn said, you know, for things to get better, you got to get better. It's all about, you know, work harder on you. And so I was reading so much.
Don,
I mean,
sorry to pause. At 3% inflation, let's just say 44 years, it would have been, this is a Dr. Finance podcast. You don't want to do this, right? So it's about $4 million you would have been earning in today's money, only at 3% inflation rate. You know, we can step that up.
All right, I'll leave it in your hands, Dr. Finance. Say so. I knew it was a lot of money. I didn't know how much, but you know, it's interesting, right? But does that make sense? So it's really about, to me, about yeah. Again, it was one of those things. I didn't know what I didn't know, but I knew that the school path felt like rules and somebody else's job, and it felt more like that. And nothing wrong with that. For some people, that's the absolute perfect path. I just didn't see it. So,
well, I commend you. The reason I even said that is because I commend you for doing it, because most people wouldn't have the courage. That makes your story a lot more spicier, because you had an option to go, like, I mean, a full ride at Stanford. It's crazy. And but you chose the right path against what appeared to be a better decision from an academic standpoint, you know, with the old school mentality, especially of, like, at least my family pushed me to college. Everybody wanted their kid to go to college. It was like the golden trophy. And you went a different route, but you proved yourself right, that you went against the grain, and it still worked out. I mean, maybe then again, going back to our former conversation, who knows if you would have went
Totally.
Stanford, we don't really know, but at
Totally.
least this worked out extremely well. So
Facebook would have been mine.
that's funny.
I absolutely, you can't even second guess that whole thing. But I think that one thing is, and I appreciate so much people like you that are academics, you were pushed that direction. I didn't have mom and dad pushing me. Nobody was going, go to school. It's essential. Mom didn't go to college. Dad didn't go to college. Grandma, grandpa, none of them. I mean, I didn't have a grandparent that ever went to college. I don't think. So again, I came from a different environment and there was no expectation of that. For me, the expectations came through probably my own sense of not wanting to be like my dad, for one thing. That was a driver. I didn't want to be like that. And then, again, early success came through sports and winning, and I wanted to win. I liked winning. I still like winning. I still like winning. I like winning in sports. I like winning in games. I like winning and I like winning in our businesses. We've got, several different businesses and I like winning. So that probably was the biggest factor.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Don. All right. So we're stepping up in our story. You met Jim Rohn. You went to work for him. You want to tell us a little about, we're going to come back to these stories through the questions. So, see what we can cover here. And then if we miss something, we'll just come back. So what was that like, that experience? What made you want to work for him, and how did he accept that? Like, what was that process like? And by the way, I don't know if you can confirm this story from Kyle Wilson. I think Kyle Wilson told me Jim Rohn spoke at an audience of like 19 or something, and Tony Robbins was there. That's how he met him. He was one of those 19 people, and that's how he eventually got connected with him. Speaking of this really small group.
I actually never knew where Tony met him. He came to one of the seminars. I remember watching this big gawky kid walk into the room where we were doing the program, but I'm not sure how he got there. That's an interesting question.
Yeah, I think it was Kyle that was saying he went to a room at a hotel. This is when Jim was older, and he saw him speaking. I think it was like 30 or 50 people. I don't remember the exact number. And he approached him afterwards and said, "Why are you speaking to, let's say 39 people or whatever it was?" And he goes, "Let me tell you something. One time I spoke to a group of 19 people, and guess who's in that audience? So you never know who you're speaking to, right?"
Right.
And it was Tony Robbins.
Right.
So that was a pretty cool story. I didn't know if you.
No, and I love Kyle. Of course, we became like brothers from different mothers and the same father, because he took over for Jim Rohn a few years after I left the company. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So Kyle and I weren't really friends, but we became friends after I moved to Texas, and I called him and said, "Guess who's moving to town?" So that was a fun experience. He's a great guy, just a great guy. He took Rohn's stuff out where it needed to be to get it bigger. Tony and I did our thing at a high level in California, but Kyle he was a difference maker for Jim's legacy, if you will, for sure.
Okay, thank you, Don. So Don, you want to walk us through your 20s?
Yeah. So, I think what I would say is that what it all came down to was meeting Rohn. I walked up to meet him the first night I saw him at the first break. But I then signed up for all his stuff. And when I went to his leadership management program, which I paid for, again, $1,000 ticket. And, I'm 17 or 18 at the time, and paid for it out of my own, I wanted to be there. And it was a group of 50 people at his ranch up in Northern California. And I remember being there just blown away. If I wasn't already blown away and impressed and just so taken with this guy, I was certainly at that point. I walked up and I said, how do I work for you? And he pointed to a guy, Rich Burnett, at the back of the room and said, "Go talk to Rich and we'll figure it out." So, he wasn't saying, "Wow, I'm impressed with you." It wasn't none of that. It was just, I was the guy asking for a job, if you will. And this was the thing to do. And Rohn wasn't involved in the hiring process with any of that group. And we ended up building a very large sales force that was selling tickets to seminars. I think that's such a funny word. We don't use that word much anymore, right? We get programs and lots of stuff, but We had a staff of almost 250 people running around Southern California and Northern California, filling rooms. We had typically 8 rooms per month with 1,000 people each room every single month. There was nothing like it in the world at that time. It was crazy how big that became. And like you could walk into any room in any restaurant in Orange County or LA or any of those areas, and there was a conversation. You'd hear Jim Rohn's name somewhere. Like everybody was talking about him. He was the major buzz. And so we got a chance to build, those programs. And of course, that means we get to hang around with them prior to and afterwards. And I just, to me, I look back and I think it was a little bit like what I have to imagine Socrates or Plato. You're at the feet of a master. You don't totally know where historic value is going to be, but you just know like there's something amazing about this. And I didn't want to leave. I went early, stayed late. I was all in on everything that was going on. I just loved absorbing it. And of course, he, in that first program, had said, one of the major keys to success was reading. And I'm sure he had some cliche, readers or leaders or something that sold me on it. But the bottom line is I started reading, and we actually had a second company in his group of companies that taught a speed reading course. I don't even know where speed reading is these days. Like I don't hear people talking about speed reading, but at that time we took a speed reading course, and I'll tell you a funny thing. Back then, Tony Robbins and I and others that you would not know the names of, we used to compete for who could read a book faster. We take like a Think and Grow Rich and blow through it in 3 minutes and 43 seconds, or, take a massive volume of, some cool story on time management or whatever, and we'd blow through it. And that was how we just absorbed book after book after book after book. And, while I know I didn't have the experience, like life years, you can learn from other people's experiences. You can learn from your own, and that takes years. You can learn from other people's, and that saves years. And I feel like if you look at Tony and I and others, I think you're going to say, we became what we became faster. We were accelerated through our personal growth and the reading and the stuff we did. So that was a big part of what we were, about, was just absorbing it. And I had a realization probably around 19 or 20 years old. And I started realizing that time and the study of time, the use of time, priority management, all of that was really one of the biggest studies. That if you looked at the biggest people in the world that were making the most, and I got in rooms with people that were like Carl Karcher, Carl's Jr.'s, Hardee's, all that stuff, Carl's Jr. I was in rooms with people like that, and I'd be like, the difference between him and the lowest person in the room in terms of economics was generally not intelligence. Most of it was related to how they leverage time. And so, I sort of became a student of that. And I remember that year that I made 100 grand, I remember Rohn saying, he used to call me Donald. And he said, good for you, Donald. He said, now that you know how to do that in less time. And it was like, how do you do that? Like, what does that mean? How do you just do it in less time? And of course, what he actually meant was, do the things that are productive, that made that money, and do those things in compressed time. So you get to do 2x or 3x or 5x or 10x. How about that for somebody we now know? But literally that's the way I started thinking. And so as a kid, I was, and I say a kid, as a young man, those were things that were driving my results and my thinking and the things that we were teaching, right? That was a sort of discover and then teach, and discover and teach, and discover and influence, right? And so that was kind of my 20s. It was really a time of growth. And then when I left him, of course, I started another chapter, which was my own company, which became a big deal. So I'll stop there just to see if there's thoughts, questions, ideas, things you want to throw in.
Yeah, thank you, Don. Who else was, I'm curious, like growing up with the Jim Rohn organization. By the way, that was a great analogy of Socrates and Plato, and then later Aristotle, right? You continue with 3 generations. Great example. So going on that, let's say there was 2 Platos, yourself and Tony. Was there any other people that were students of Rohn that was hanging around him in his like growth phase that eventually became something like highly successful? I'm sure there were a few, but is there any ones that you want to mention or?
In that era, there are people I can still, go on Facebook and find friends, or in LinkedIn and find friends that came from that time that have their own companies. But in terms of making major marks,
Yes.
I would say those two. And while Mark Hughes wasn't one of our staff, he was one of our early adapters, and he was the one with, he actually founded Herbalife, and then Larry Thompson came along later. Larry was a follower of Jim's for sure. Larry and his wife live near Kyle Wilson in Texas, and they're still very much involved in teaching and all of that. There was a number of people that went off and started big things, but I think that what would add to people listening to this is the influence of people like Mark Victor Hansen, or the influence that Rohn had on Mark Victor Hansen. And Mark is the chicken soup, he and yes, of course, his partner, his writing partner,
Jack Canfield.
Jack Canfield, wrote all the chicken soup books, right?
Mm-hmm.
The biggest authors in the world. Nobody's ever sold more books than those guys. He was right there all the time, and we saw Mark. In fact, I'll jump ahead. So Rohn died 13 years ago. He passed away in December 13 years ago, and before he did, he had been sick for some months. And Success Magazine had bought his library from Kyle Wilson and his IP. So all of his intellectual property was moving over to Success.
Wow.
And Success had 2 rooms. And in the speaking world, of the entertainment world, you got green rooms, right? You're going to film, and you got green rooms, and that's where all the stars go before, and you see them on the Tonight Show, whatever, and they go to the green room. We had 2 green rooms filled with people that were coming for one purpose, and they were going to talk one-to-one on the camera to Jim Rohn to say who he was to them in their life and in their accomplishments. So who was in that room in Dallas, and who was in that room in Anaheim, California? And I was not in Dallas, but I know Tony was there. We had a room, and Mark Victor Hansen, Jack Canfield were there. Dennis Waitley was there. Les Brown was there. I mean, if you want to go to people that have made a major impact on the world and realize they were all influenced by this guy,
mm-hmm.
They were all young people who came at him, through him, at some point in their lives. And, many of them are 10 years younger than him, right? He was 10, 20 years younger, which means all this generation that we see as big influential leaders today, the John Maxwells of the world, almost everybody came through Jim Rohn in some way, shape, or form.
Mm. I think I saw a picture, maybe it was Kyle Wilson's Instagram page, of somebody. It was Jim Rohn, Brian Tracy, and Dennis Waitley. They were all sitting together, and then the captions underneath were something like, 3 legends at one time. And it's true, like they kind of were, at that moment, they were leading 3 different paths. And I know, of course, it all stems back, and we can talk about this later, Napoleon Hill and the whole lineage and stuff, right? So self-development. But
Chris Widener is another big name. He's written 23, 25 books. He's in the Hall of Fame, Speaker Hall of Fame. Chris was an early on in that stuff. And Kyle was, before he was Jim's partner, he was flowing through that. So, I mean, there was a lot of people impacted by the work that Jim did. And, I know Tom Ziegler. I didn't know personally, I didn't hang out with Zig, but I met him. But knowing Tom, there was a few people, there was 3 or 4 people at that time, maybe 6, 8 at the most, but there were a few names that influenced the world. And to this day, those are the classics. Those are the people that somebody will say, my favorite was, and those are the people, and Jim Rohn was one of them.
Yeah, and going back to the question that sparked this, it was really about the people that worked for him, that were hanging around all the time, not so much the people that eventually he influenced through his speaking and stuff. And you said 250 people were working for him at that moment, and obviously you two were both part of that number. I was just wondering, like, how many of them actually went on and did their own thing.
Yeah, other training companies, corporate training companies, but again, of note, not any that probably hit as big as what Tony and I did, actually. in our worlds. So, and of course, Tony wins the game. I mean, he trumped everybody.
Yeah, Dennis Waitley on this podcast, he said, Tony, that's our celebrity. Like, like hearing it from that, I mean, you can't argue anymore. It's like, all right, so Dennis Waitley saying he's our celebrity, and he sold 100 million copies of his book back in the late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that explains a lot.
It does explain a lot for sure. Yeah. We just had Tony at a couple events last August, and the August before that, we had him come in, and I just love being in touch with him still. We get to hang out every so often for things that we do, and we have a lot of common friends. And he came on stage and he's thanked some people that had put the function on at the highest levels, and then thanked me for bringing him to it. And it was interesting because he said, how long have we known each other? It's like 40 plus years. Like, we were kids. We were just kids. So it's fun. And his world and my world were very similar for a long, long time. But again, he took it to a whole other level. I mean, that's the things that it's just phenomenal to watch one human being push themselves that far and go that fast and go, that deep. He's an inspiration for sure.
Yeah. Ryan Blair, I was listening. He was a member here, one of our podcast guests.
Yeah.
And he did an interview with Tony Robbins I watched, and he asked him a question. He passed him a book from when he was younger and said, what would you give this guy advice? What would you tell him to do? This is a younger Tony Robbins on the cover of his book. He goes, I would tell him to breathe. He must, I mean, it's great advice, right? Like, slow down a little bit, going too fast, but.
Yeah. He's hit a lot of phases in his life too. I mean, he's certainly in a very different place today than he was. And yeah, it's like, you just learn. At first you're, all about getting successful and getting money and getting results. And I don't think that really tails off, but other things come up and become bigger priorities, and you can start to see the bigger picture of how all things fit together, how life could be. And it's a shame that we don't get wise until we're typically in our 30s and 40s and even 50s and 60s, right? And for some people, even later. But
some never.
Sometimes never. Yeah, for some never.
So thank you, Don. All right, so you left at 26, Jim Rohn organization, one of the leading self-development gurus of all time. And why did you leave, and where did you go? And how did you get there? What was your plan, if you had one?
Oh man, I had no plan. You're giving me way too much credit. So, I was Jim's president, and he got married.
Oh, you actually elevated to the status of president working for him.
Yeah, I was his president for 2 years,
wow.
From 24 to 26 years old. And he got married, and he met and married a quite a bit younger woman. And I just found it was challenging because we would make decisions during the day. He would change his mind that night, come back, and it got very frustrating for me. And I didn't have the emotional wherewithal to understand even how to address it. It was almost like I was working against his wife. And I resigned. I was like, I can't do this anymore. So I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a job. I didn't have a business. I didn't have anything. I just decided I couldn't do that anymore. And it's a shame because I remember thinking to myself, I would be by his side and doing, taking him big time and I love traveling with him. We'd, travel all over the world together. And, I mean, that private time, those comments, those interactions, those daily conversations, that was amazing to me. It was just gold. So I didn't love leaving, but I had to, and I just knew I couldn't. I didn't know how to deal with it. So I jumped. I just jumped. Looking back on it, could I have done it differently? I can think of 12 things I could have done now, but at the time I didn't have the emotional wherewithal to know. So I did. And I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. I had a roommate at the time who I had hired at Jim's company. And I said to him one day, well, do you want to start something? And then we were trying to figure out what is it we're going to teach. We didn't want to be Jim Rohn Jr. We didn't want to be Zig Ziglar. We didn't want, we were kids. We were 26 years old. I mean, we didn't have, all this vast experience. And so we were trying to figure it out. And I remember we started speaking on sales. It was going to be more like time management and sales scripts and sales skills and, things that were related to increasing sales. And we had a pretty good niche. I was pretty well known in the real estate space through the Jim Rohn era, that real estate was coming into its own. Real estate was just growing up. It was coming out of mom and pop into franchise systems like Century 21 and ERA and the early franchise days of real estate. And I was there kind of as Jim Rohn's guy, but we were in that industry. And so I felt very comfortable there. And so we started doing trainings in that space. And there was one little subject, Dr. Finance, one subject called personal marketing, personal branding. And it was just a part of a subject of 8 hours. And when we got the feedback sheets, what did you like? What was best? What was, what could we redo? What could we do better? Whatever. It was like that piece right there. That's amazing. And so what we did quickly was we figured out we had a little hot button there and we started expanding it. Instead of 30 minutes, it was an hour, then it was an hour and a half, it was 2 hours, it was 3 hours. Eventually it became our whole focus. And we became the personal brand guys in the real estate space. And we taught people that it wasn't about those brands that they were joining, it wasn't about wearing a gold coat, it was about your brand. And so we kind of evolved into it. And, I say we got lucky, but we were smart enough to recognize a trend and something we had created, and we were the trendsetter. We actually changed the industry dramatically. We were actually named top 25 most influential people in the industry, and basically changed everything. What we see today in the real estate space, Hobbs Herder, my partner's name was Herder, Greg Herder. We changed the industry dramatically. So that was our next step, right? Going from Rohn to that.
There was no personal brand like courses or anything before then?
Nobody ever thought of it. No.
Wow. Because now it's like, especially on Clubhouse, the past couple of years, it's all they talk about is personal brand.
No, there was nothing. There was nothing in any industry that was related to personal branding. And we were the first ones, but we chose it in a real estate space where they are their own brands. They are their own businesses for independent contractors. Could have been done in other industries, but the most natural was that one. Insurance people kind of are that way, but they actually are employed mostly. So, that branding thing was appropriate for that market. And we took off down that path. And I remember we had flocks of people coming to see us. We were building big rooms full of people, and they were spending way more than realtors ever spent on programs because it was a highly specialized thing. I remember one day we were teaching, and the stage always at the breaks, and people come up and shake hands. Oh, you're amazing and whatever. And this one, my partner and I were standing next to each other on the stage, and somebody said, "Who does this personal marketing stuff? Like, you're talking about some great ideas. Who does it?" And my partner said, "We do." And I was, almost like Scooby-Doo. We do. We didn't. And that was the beginning of our ad agency. And so we ended up building a big team of people, writers, graphic people, creatives, production, everything. And eventually built that into about 150 people in a $25 million a year company.
Wow.
So we were a large training company at that time.
What all right, so you were basically in the training and the education space for real estate and / advertising. Where do you guys relate to the Ferries, Michael Ferry and Tom Ferry? Like, where did you fit into them? Because I thought that like Mike was one of the first like real estate coaches in the 70s. I don't know. I could be off.
Yeah, kind of in the same era, actually. Ironically, Mike and we had diametrically opposed philosophies. So Mike's dad, Tom's son.
Yeah.
So I've known Tom since he was a little kid. But Mike was get on the phone, cold call, pound the phones, keep in touch with people, get in the phone book, call people. And we were on the other side going, attract them, just get them coming your direction. When you're the brand and people know you, like you, trust you, and love you, they're going to call you and say, "Hey, come list me." They're going to call you and say, "Hey, we want to buy a house, come and see us." And we built bigger agents because our agents were more leveraged. There's only so many of these you can do. And the problem is when it works, and it does, of course, it does work, but then you have clients and you don't have time for this. And suddenly you see peaks and valleys. And so that was the downside of that philosophy. Mike's still out there, doing his thing. And we started almost the same year. We were 6 miles apart in Orange County, California. We disliked each other immensely from close distance. And we were invited to some of the same stages for conventions and all that stuff because we were a big deal. And of course, Tom came along much later, and kind of a renegade in his family, and you know, talked pretty harshly about his dad and all that stuff. But anyway, that was a different era, because he was kind of catching all of it, talking more as we evolved into more the what's a total success look like. That's kind of where Tom started. What's it look like from A to Z? And of course, you know, let's face it, in any business, every business today, there's a lot more marketing conversation, funnels, and, you know, that all that stuff has become a big conversation. Podcasting, it's different, but what it all comes down to is, you know, how do we build the brand that attracts people to us? And that's the leverage. You know, that what we know is that Nike's not calling you going, hey, we saw you running and those shoes are pathetic. I mean, come on, get in here and see our new line. Everything is about, you know, driving. The way business works is through marketing. And so we knew that we had something going for us. And of course, the industry recognized that as well. But yeah, there was no personal branding. It was all about sitting on floor time, waiting for calls to come in, answering calls from house ads and things like that. It was very sales driven. And we came along and said, it's not about selling at all. It's about marketing. And how do we become attractors of the business? So quite different.
So one of my, family businesses is real estate. I grew up in the real estate business, besides all the other stuff, you know, about my personal brand.
Yeah.
Right?
You said dad was at a real estate company.
And Tom Ferry, I watched a lot of his videos.
Yeah.
And hearing him, though, I think his message resonates very similar to what you're talking about. He's not like his dad at all. I've listened to his dad.
No.
So probably based on your story here, I have a feeling that you would be pretty much his role model for what he's talking about, because you were kind of saying the same thing, or you had a similar message many years before he really even took off. So would you say you would probably be like the grandfather in that school of thought?
In that school of thought, for sure. Absolutely. He, I retired back in 2010. So I'm a part of history over there on that side. And I have a different impact in real estate today, but I retired in 2010 from Hobbs Herter. And actually I stepped out in 2009, and then 2010, I let go of all ownership. But Tom was, he's come up, I won't say he's come out of nowhere, but he's become monstrous the last 10 years.
He's big.
And at that time he was not. He was coming, but he was still where we were. I mean, you go through those evolutions, right? You grow and you figure it out. So yeah, they built the biggest training company in the real estate space by far ever in history now. So yeah.
And he's got all the right connections. He's with Gary V. I mean, he's connected to Gary V and, a lot of other folks. So
a lot of other folks. Yeah. He took it but again, I think the biggest thing there is the same lesson that any entrepreneur that's watching this or listening to this should take on. And that is, whatever it is you think you do so well, it's not about that. It's about the marketing of that. It's about the marketing of you. It's about getting people to know you, like you, trust you, and think of you in that category of service that you provide. And most people still don't get that. They think that, I'm a great attorney. I don't care what it is. I'm great at it. Well, that's not the answer to becoming big. I know people that suck and are really great at are really big in what they do. Unfortunately, that's just a reality, right? Marketing drives the results. And so I like to say, I hope ethically speaking, you're good human beings, you deliver on your promise, you have a heart for service, you give in ways that are great. But if you're a marketer, you could suck and still do really, really well.
The best known beats the best. You agree?
Unfortunately, yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, right? I mean, I wish it wasn't that way, but it is. Yeah.
Thank you, Don. All right. So Don, how long did you work for, how long did you own and operate Hertz and Hobbs?
Hobbs Herter, we were 23 years old when I left. So we were the big deal for a long, long time.
About 23 years, you said?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. We changed the whole industry over those 23 years.
Wow. Okay, cool. We're going to pick up on that topic a little bit later. So what'd you do after Hobbs and Herter then? Can you bring us to present?
I took 2 years off. I fed hummingbirds and took naps and golfed.
Oh, during the Great Recession, right? You said you
I was
retired.
kind of at the end of that, 10, 11, something in that range. I think the recession was, ending, but I took a couple of years off. I was teaching a lot during that time. I was teaching realtors who were losing everything. And, it was a great time to go rescue people and help people. And it was a time that I remember fondly because I've always said I love what I do so much I would do it for free. And I did it for 2 years for free because they needed it and I had the freedom to do that. And so that was cool. And then 2000 something or 11, 12 probably, I bought into a partnership on a real estate company. We had 9 states for a franchise operation. And we were the regional owners. And that was exciting times because we got to go take all the stuff that I had done for everybody else's company and bring it into my own company and, frame that up. And that was cool. And then somewhere in that time frame, a buddy of mine by the name of Gary Keller called me. And Gary is the founder of Keller Williams Real Estate. And Gary and I had known each other for years. In fact, I was his first speaker for his first convention back in 1989.
Really?
When that company, which turned out to be the biggest company in the world, they only had 350 agents at the time, 350 agents in the whole country at the time. And that's 89. So I've known Gary for years, and Gary called me and said, hey, let's talk. I want to be in business with you. I realize that you're out there and your talents are out there, and I want to figure out what we can do. And I've got a lot of companies and I've got a lot of things, and bring me an idea. I want to be in business with you. And that was pretty flattering and pretty cool. So I flew to Austin, stayed with him for a couple of days, and we explored. And eventually we built a company together, which came from another book he was writing at the time called The One Thing. I don't know if you ever saw that book or read it.
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a game changer, probably on the bestseller list for, not record numbers of years, but like a big deal in the book space. And I got to build the training courses, the coaching, the all of it, everything. We built a company around that. So I got to do that for a few years. And then that took me to Austin, where I met a blonde woman who's upstairs, and she was with Keller, and she called me to tell me she was leaving the company and going to a different real estate company, which put us in we were just friends, but as I was trying to be way more than friends, which eventually happened a couple of years later, we were in 2 opposing companies. Wow. And that became some interesting dynamics and changed our game forever too. So now we've got lots of businesses. We're in the real estate space. We're in the real estate training space. We've got a big coaching company that coaches 6 and 7 figure people, not just in real estate, but in any industry. And we've got, she's just launching a technology platform this next week that's going to blow the industry up. So we've got a lot of fun things we do, and we do it all in Puerto Rico. So that kind of takes us to the present.
Wow, that is super cool. You have a really, really diverse background, man. I love it. And being, about in real estate for a long time, I appreciate everything you're doing. It kind of ties the story of my own life in, like hearing all this stuff and this is off the podcast conversations we had, with Keller Williams and then, EXP, and then this with Tom Ferry, like, all the videos I watched him. He's the one who taught me how to do an open house like many, many years ago. I watched his video. How do you do an open house? I never did it before, and I had to do it one time. And so, yeah, it's really cool. Thank you, Don. I appreciate that. So you're living in Puerto Rico right now. According to a friend of ours, you live in a giant mansion on the beach. I'm not sure if that's true, and if you want to give us a tour.
I'm not giving you a tour because I can't figure out how I would do that anyway. But no,
Yeah.
we're building a home right across from where we are right now. We can actually watch it being built. And no, it's not a giant mansion. In fact, there aren't that many giant mansions here. It's a little bit different lifestyle, but we're building one that's grown up, and it's going to be about 4,000 square feet on one single level. And it's really got glass. It reminds me of, for those that have been there, it reminds me of a Palm Springs house, or
Wow.
Palm Desert, or maybe even a Miami house, more like that, a little bit. modern and cool. So we've got that coming out. That'll happen next year. So in the meantime, we're hanging out and enjoying the tax advantages of living in Puerto Rico, this tax haven.
Wow, that's incredible. You've had some retreats in Puerto Rico.
We've done
correct?
a few things. Yeah, we've done a few things here. Yeah.
How does that work out? Just curious, because I'm working on my second retreat now in Utah, and I was curious about Puerto Rico.
It's good. I mean, it's a different kind of thing. So it isn't like, there's any tax advantages to bringing your event here. I will say you probably have less options. If I were doing a function here, we do it because there's a lot of us that live here that are our friends. And when we bring people here, we get to not travel. And so we do it for selfish reasons that way. But I think for you, if you were having to travel anyway, I can think there's probably a lot of locations that I might do better. Puerto Rico's got some beautiful places. There's a couple great hotels, including the Ritz-Carlton and others that are downtown San Juan, which is fun. And there's gambling, and there's 500-year-old city with cobblestones, and
Beautiful.
It's beautiful. So, I mean, there's lots of things to do here. And if you're bringing an event here and you're bringing people from all over the country, it's probably not the most centralized for that. But if you decide to come down, I'll help you. I'll help you with some stuff.
That would be really, really cool.
You might even have a speaker for it if you wanted one.
Wow. Oh, geez. Don, let's talk offline. I think that would be awesome. What's the best time of the year to go there?
Probably, winter. It's we're coming into a little bit of a rainy season now, and we've been enjoying, what I love about Puerto Rico is the summers get up to like 90, and the winters get down to about 70. And, almost every day, if people ask, I just go, I haven't looked, but it's 82 to 84, because it's always 82 to 84. I don't have to look. I just know it's 82 to 84.
That's the funny thing about living here. Like here, living in Philadelphia, like especially in April and March, we don't know what the temperature is. Like it was 80 degrees, 90 degrees last week. And now this morning I woke up, it was like early 40s. And every day is like that,
I'm a Southern California boy. So, Dr. Finance, I don't hang out well in cold weather. I just don't. I don't like traveling to it. I used to have a laughable snow fee if I was traveling for my business and Hobbs Herder was being brought in. If we were going in winter, I would be like a double fee because I just didn't want to go.
That's funny. Well, I'll invite you up here in the winter, and I'll show you the misery we go through anytime you want.
Not happening. I'm not coming.
All right. Well, thank you, Don. Don, last question before we wrap up this segment. So we initially talked about, design your own life book, design your own future event, the course of where you want that direction to go. If you could have went back to Jim Rohn, because I'm curious about this, went back to when you left Jim Rohn. Let's say that you were able to figure out the right emotions to deal with that situation and weather the storm. If your best guess, you never went into real estate, you never created that amazing company, where do you think you would have ended up? I mean, you already had all the qualities of a successful person. You just needed the ability to deal with that moment, that situation. And Jim Rohn, I'm sure you already elevated to president. Imagine what you would have did. Would you have been the next Kyle Wilson? Would you have went beyond that? Like, what do you think?
I don't know. It's all speculative, and I guess that's what you're asking for, of course. But I'll say two things. One is I think I would have been very happy to have been Jim's number 2 for a long time. I think I would have been in that space. I think I would have loved being around the things we could create. The last thing that I was part of just before I left, the last thing I was part of is we signed a contract for his material to be put out through Nightingale Conant, and of course Earl Nightingale's products and Lloyd Conant and the Nightingale Group. That was a big deal at that time. That was as big as it got for somebody. If you had a program there, that was the deal. I think we could have done some big stuff. I know that I would not have turned into what I turned into because I wouldn't have been forced to create something from my own. And I think, again, speculation, I'm sure it would have been fun. It would have been a fun ride. I would have loved it. I love being at the feet of, Plato and Socrates. I love being at that place. You know, and we talk about those forks in the road.
Yeah.
What would have been, what would have been. I look back, and of course, I absolutely know that this turned out the way it was supposed to turn out. And I think that would have been an adventure in itself. That would have been great, because we would have changed lives. I mean, Rohn's audiences were about maybe 2 to 3 million people during his lifetime.
Yeah.
You know, maybe it would have been 5 or 6 or 8. I mean, who knows? It would have been maybe bigger. But I went off and I did my almost 2 million people in real estate only. So, you know, it's like it was meant to be the way it was. And I'm not sure what we would have created, but I sure loved every minute of being around him. And he taught me so much about how to deal with life stuff and business stuff. And he just wasn't shaken by stuff. He had, you know, an unshakable demeanor, even in the face of crap that was happening, you know, just, so I loved it. I loved it. I would have loved being on that journey with him. His wife and I, you know, kissed, and we didn't kiss actually, but we kissed and made up at his funeral, when that was all going on. Because I said to her, you know, I didn't know what to do with that situation. And she kind of described it from her side, and she apologized for her part in it. And I apologized for my part in it. And, you know, we healed that, but there was not a thing we could do to make it different.
Yeah, because your personality, I've seen you on stage. I mean, you're not shy. You're a very good speaker. So other folks who might have hid during that time, you would have wanted to be at some point, I'm sure, a focal point. So possibly where he passes the torch to you, right? Like someone who's an introvert they would have always been number 2. At some point, you would have been number 1, my best guess, because you're not an introvert. Like you were able to speak. So you might have been that.
Yeah, I think the eventuality is I would have had to do something else, but I don't know how that would have ended. And so I know how it ended.
I appreciate you going down this path for a moment. I was just curious, you know, like,
yeah.
All right. Thank you, Don. Appreciate it. It's been a great interview so far. We're moving into our next segment. We got some questions. So I'll ask you about 20 questions or so, and then we'll continue on.
All right. So incredible. We're here with Don Hobbs, folks, and we are moving into our question segment. And during this little brief break that we took, I found out some more information about Don's past on Clubhouse. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But first question I have for you, Don, is let's get a quick overview of your books. Do you have any books that you wrote or are part of, co-authored, or anything like that?
That's so funny. I've got one that I'm co-authoring right now that I'm working on, but no, in fact, when I went to work with Gary, and of course we were building out everything around his, I don't know, 5th book or something like that, Gary Keller, that is. When I was there in Austin, kind of looking at whether I was going to say yes and come to Texas, and he said, "You've got to have 5 books in you." And I'm like, "I'm sure I've got at least that." And I still don't have a book. And I, you know, every time I hear somebody writing a book, and I'm like, I know I should. I mean, I'm so far behind on it. To me, it's there's a legacy part of it, and then there's another part which is it doesn't inspire me because I like talking. But I know that, you know, I can translate that, and there's some good stuff to put out, and from a legacy standpoint. So there's books coming. There's no book out there. I've done workbooks. I got so much stuff in the way of workbooks and homework books and marketing workbooks and all kinds of stuff, but nothing that the public's going to have access to that doesn't come through one of my courses. So yeah. So thanks for the thought. If I had one, you'd let me promote it. I don't have one.
Well, if you write one, I'd be happy to write an intro or something for you. And by the way, this 2.5 hour podcast, for people that don't really like to write, what you may want to do is you can transcribe some of this and just instantly I know you're into the ChatGPT thing, right? You can instantly turn it into a book by just taking the transcription and just have a copyright editor to break it down or add some more stories that you thought, and you don't have to write any of it. You can have somebody transcribe it as you're going. Just by having dinner with somebody, they can have a pen out.
Do you know that if I were to take all the PowerPoint presentations, all the trainings that I've created, I've got 10 books.
Easy, right?
Yeah, easily. Yeah. I just, and I have people ask me about it all the time. I have people want to do it with me all the time. And yeah, it'll become a priority at some point.
Thank you, Don. All right, Don. So next question, how did it feel? I mean, we went into your story a lot, but now we're just going to highlight some parts that we didn't cover without, rehashing things. But how did it feel to actually work for Jim Rohn? Like, what was that general feeling? And I know you touched upon the Socrates Plato analogy, which was a great one.
I loved it. I loved every second of it. I can't really remember. It's funny. I have a habit of seeing the best in things, and I could turn even my childhood story of with the rageful father and all that into a positive story. But I don't remember anything that I don't love about my time working with Jim Rohn. It was like always, I was anxious for the next conversation. I was anxious for our decisions. I was anxious to push him out. I was excited to make things happen. And I loved that, man. My video to him was all about the impact he'd had on me as a father figure. And of course, I'm bawling. Everybody said much the same thing when you were talking to this camera and saying those things to him. Everybody ended up in tears, but I was just moved so much because I know that life would have been very, very, very different had I not taken that track, of these sliding door moments. For sure, that was one that was a life changer. I wouldn't be in Puerto Rico today. I have no doubt life would have been very different had it not been for that moment. So I'm grateful eternally to that man. And I think his thoughts, I think his quotes, I think his thoughts. I don't try. I don't try and duplicate him. I don't try to be him. And yet people tell me all the time, you sound your cadence. There's things, right, that just the influence was huge. So for me, it was a beautiful experience and an incredible time of growth for my life.
And you're part of his legacy, right? Like you're walking around.
Yeah, I suppose, I recognize that, that you carry on somebody's, not so much their message, although I think an element of that, I think it's more their energy. Mm. That his world was about helping other people. And that's what I love doing.
Did you ever want to make it out with your dad? Like, better the relationship?
I actually did. I got to a point in my 40s where I finally said, it's not okay anymore to have this father that's not, and all that stuff. And had a very interesting healing conversation that, it wouldn't have all sounded healing. It was like yelling and screaming and laughing and crying and all of that. And when it was all done, 2+ hours later, I called my assistant. It's kind of a comical story. I called my assistant. I said, book me a ticket to go see my dad tomorrow. And she's like, you're going to go see your father tomorrow? Because she used to have to remind me to call him. Like I had every 3 weeks, remind me to call dad, just so I, call him and go, how's the weather? How's this? How's that? All right. Good talking to you, Dad. It was just never part of my world, and nothing more than obligation. And so that it was like freedom. And ironically, I went it was October. All that happened in October, and he was fine. I mean, he was living a relatively healthy life. He'd had heart challenges many years earlier and whatever, but I went and we celebrated Christmas. I said, I won't be back for Christmas. Let's just do Christmas, right? I mean, Christmas is a spirit, and we'll go buy a few gifts, and wrapping paper's already available. I mean, they're already celebrating Christmas in the stores, and let's go do Christmas. And we did Christmas, and ironically, he died on December 5th of that year. And so we had healed just before. And really, really ironic and so special now was his wife, who was obviously not my mom, his wife, said to me, from the time you guys had that conversation, he had never lived as free. Like I'd never seen him be as free as he was after that conversation freed him. Wow. And of course, it changed my world, freed him up, all the guilt, all the stuff. He even said to me in that hard conversation, he said, I told a friend the other day that I was not a good father. And I got ticked off beyond, I went, you told somebody else you weren't a good father? You didn't call me to tell me you were a lousy father? It's like, I went ballistic, and I don't lose my temper too much, but that was that was a chance for me to say what needed to be said. And we, we had it out and freed the energy and, just came back to the love of all of it. And that's where he left. He went out on that energy. So I'm very pleased. And, that was an honor to witness that whole thing. It's pretty special.
When did you meet him? You said December 5th he passed, but how long before?
It was October of that year.
You spent like what, a weekend with him, or?
Yeah, I spent like 34 days there.
Wow. That is an incredible story. And he was in rather good health when you saw him.
Yeah, I mean, clearly not great, but he was not dying. I mean, there was no indication that there was any shortage. He had a heart attack and passed.
Is it possible that you meeting him, like you said, freed him to the point where possibly he was waiting for decades for this moment, and he said, I don't have anything to live for. This is what my goal was.
I'm done here. Yeah, no, I've thought that many times. Like it allowed him to move on.
Yeah, goosebumps. Oh, man. It's
interesting. I mean, certainly, I don't know the whole of it, but I was only child, so that would have been a heavy thing. He didn't have like other successful stories of kids, so this was a biggie. But he was very much not a part of any of my success. Knew very little about what I did. Didn't just was never engaged and involved with that. So I woke up in my 40s thinking to myself, I realized how much of my work up to that point, I was living in a 9,000 square foot mansion with columns out front and a Bentley in front and all kinds of interesting things. And I remember thinking to myself, a little bit of that, what was her name? Peggy something or other, that had the song, "Is That All There Is?" And I remember thinking that most of this was because I was still looking for my dad to approve. Like a lot of my work wasn't for my success. It was so that I could prove to him I was worthy of him. The strange things we do in our heads.
Mm. What was that weekend like? Did you guys want to hugging it out and all that stuff? And
we it was totally all good. It was love and fun and just celebrating his life where he was and where they were, and just really enjoying it. There was no, we were done with that other conversation.
I appreciate you going down this route for a moment, because this is a great example to our audience. Tony Rodriguez had a very similar story with his father.
We had the same dad. Different name, but same dad. I know.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Tony. Tony. Thank you, Don. Appreciate you. And I'm really honored that things worked out. I mean, imagine if you would have waited just a few more months. What was pressing you inside to go do this now? Something was a sense of urgency. You kind of had some clock going in you that was saying, you got to do this right now.
I believe in energy. I believe in the whole world. We're all energy. And I believe that the connection between people is energy. And I think that, did I sense something? Did I have an inner feeling that was related to all that? Yeah, absolutely. Can I explain it to you? Can I prove it? No, but I'm sure I know what I know.
I believe it too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Don. Appreciate you. All right. So Don, how did it feel to work with Tony Robbins? I mean, maybe some cool stories we haven't talked about over the years. Something that has something unique to this show.
We had almost no fun stories working together other than we were competing. And I always loved having pictures of me with trophies and stuff. I found a picture of him not long ago, and very pimply face. It was probably like he was 18 or 19, and I can't find it right now. I can't find it, and it's somewhere between here and Austin where we moved. But anyway, we don't have a lot of that, but I can tell you, whenever I have my trophy and he's not in the picture, which means I won, I always love that. But I'll tell you, we had some fun stories since then, because we've done a lot of fun things together. Back when we were doing a big program, a Hobbs herder program in San Diego, and comical stuff. So he had just taken up the helicopter flying and was a pilot, and had just bought his first jet helicopter. And we were down in San Diego. He lived in San Diego. I lived in Orange County. And my partner and I were down doing a program, and he said, well, when you're done, call me and we'll meet at Carlsbad Airport and we'll go for a flight. That's right. So that was cool. So I call him, we're on our way. I see him fly by in his BMW 850, flying by way faster than we were going to try. And I thought we were late. He was late. So he gets there. We take off on this flight. We were cruising the coast. We were talking about La Jolla and Carlsbad, La Jolla, all that San Diego area. And we're down along the surf and finding, dolphins in the surf and stuff, really a blast. And all of a sudden he says to me, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm not doing anything. And his hand is shaking like this on the stick. Helicopters don't have steering wheels. They've got a stick that flies them, right? And something was going wrong. And so suddenly he was in a place where that he was, this was out of control. There was something going wrong here and he wasn't sure what, but it was bad. And so I'm like, it's not me, brother. It's not me. So we ended up trying to land this thing, and he was going to not crash land it, but landed on the sand in the beach, and recognized that in this cliff area that he would never have recovered the chopper because the surf was coming in and it would have taken it out, and that would have been the end of that, right? So he fights the stick and we get shaken all the way up to the top of the cliff and over in the park, and he drops it from about 4 feet. So we crash landed the helicopter. And the funny part of it is, of course, nobody was hurt. We were all great. My business partner was back here and I was in the passenger seat and he was flying, and everybody was fine. And his wife, then Becky, and the kids, everybody came out to get us, and they brought out security to watch the chopper because it was going to spend the night there, and all of that. And of course, the next day, the newspaper says Tony Robbins and 2 unknown passengers. And of course, I never let him forget that. I was like, what do you mean freaking unknown passengers, right? So we had some fun there. I was also there with him when he met Becky in Denver, Colorado.
Wait, I'm sorry. I just want to go back to that story real quick.
Yeah.
So wait, you guys, it was you, Tony, and a business partner.
My business partner. Yeah.
Your business partner was flying a helicopter.
Yeah.
And had like a dicey little event going on there, and you guys almost crashed.
Well, if you think about it, we almost took out 2 of the biggest training companies in the world. We weren't yet all of that, but we were both becoming that. And so yeah, it would have been interesting.
Oh wow. That is a crazy story. When was this?
Probably early 90s, somewhere in that range.
Wow. Okay, I'm sorry. What was it? I'm still trying to wrap my head around that story. What was the next story?
I was there when he met Becky, who was his first wife. They were married for many years, I think 20 years ish. And then I was with him in Denver, Colorado at his firewalk when he met her. And then I was years later in Fiji with him when he started dating Sage. It was, she was coming, he tells the story and I won't spoil it for anybody, but he was kind of checking out different women that he was interested in, and she was there. And so she ended up winning the prize, and they're still happily married, and she's amazing. And his life is totally different as a result of Sage, but I was there when they met too. So yeah, we've kind of been in each other's lives around, important things. And in Fiji, we jumped off perfectly good bridges into rivers, and, we've had a lot of fun, crazy, wacky experiences, but he's always pushing the limits. So whatever is going on, you can count on whatever his version of it is going to be pushing the edge.
That's brilliant. So you were there at all the moments for his 3 wives, pretty much, you're saying, right?
2 wives.
2 wives? Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I gotta learn this story a little better. Where does Jarek come in? Just curious.
Jarek was from Liz Acosta, and they never got married, but that was during the Jim Rohn era.
Oh, okay.
She was Liz was pregnant, and Jarek was that baby, and so I've known Jarek since he was in the womb.
Wow. All right. Well, thank you so much, Don. Appreciate you, and hopefully we can get Tony Robbins on this. I mean, we've had so many people that know him, work for him. Jay Abraham, mentor to him. Just got to get Tony. So working on it. All right. Well, thank you. And then when he gets here, by the way, I'm going to ask him his version of that story.
Oh yeah, perfect. Yeah, he'll definitely have one.
All right. Let's see. Why is the self-help movement important? Now, just to give you the briefing, who's been on here, we've had all kinds of superstars, a lot of them in the self-help movement. And Jim Cathcart, legend. He was there in the 70s. He was the president of the NSA, all kinds of stuff. His version of the story is incredible. He actually gave us a tour of his bookshelf behind him, and he read all those great books. I mean, going back way past Napoleon Hill, the birth of the movement. So, but why is the self-help movement important in general? Why is it important for people to learn about this versus something else?
Well, I mean, I think of it now, I think of it as less of a movement, as, I think this is the evolution of our world, the training space, this self development, it's taken on different forms, because you can take now, you're going to go take a class with Russell Brunson on marketing, but it's still self-improvement, right? There's elements of that. It's going to be $1 trillion business. It's huge, because people are not relying on the traditional education. And, Rohn had an interesting phrase about that. You mentioned my not education, your family, believed in that. Rohn would say, that standard education gets you standard results, and self-education will get you anything you want. Because a lot of times in school, we're learning stuff for learning's sake and for degree's sake. And sometimes we actually learn what we need for the occupation that we actually end up with, right? That also happens. But when you are talking about your self-education, really, you're deciding on what you want. You're deciding on what the education is that I need. You're deciding on what path, where are my weaknesses, where's the gap between where I am and where I want to go, and what do I need to be learning to make that gap, close that gap. And I think that for people today, that the mindset is the foundation for that. If you think about Think and Grow Rich, you look at all the foundational books and all the foundational speakers, Norman Vincent Peale's, and again, the names we've already named. And of course, Napoleon Hill would have written Think and Grow Rich back in the 30s. You think about all that, and you realize that it's all about the mind, the power of the mind. And we recognize the fact that, we, at best, they say even the genius level, the genius people are only tapping into 10% of their brain power. We can create, we can attract. If you look at some of the speakers today, what's the big topic? It's, the energy of attraction, right? And so a lot of it is people coming to a greater heightened awareness that we are developing people, that we're evolving. You talked about evolution in our little break time, right? The evolution of the evolution, that we are evolving human beings. And if we don't, Rohn used to say, if you could do more, if you could be more, should you? I mean, it's just a philosophical question, right? It's like, why would you let yourself be less than you could be? Well, because we've coasted and we've watched enough TV about mediocrity to learn that it's okay to be mediocre, right? It's like, that's what TV is about. And by the way, we've watched the news, and we're certainly somewhere between depressed and scared, which is exactly where the news wants us. That's what they sell. So when you start to take charge and realize, I can't control the world, I can't control politics, I can't control our president or the policies, what I can control is everything about my life. And when you start to look at that, then you're like, well, how do I learn more about that? Where's the evolution of me? And I think that we need to take responsibility, take charge for ourselves, decide what we want, choose the direction, and then of course, figure out who are the people that are going to play around me. Rohn said, it's the 5 people that you hang around the most that become your norm. And it's not how he said it, but that we are impacted by the 5 people we are around the most. And Tony talks a lot about proximity to those top talents. That
Proximity is power. Yeah.
Proximity is power, for sure. And we realize that, he tells a great story of being on a trip with some billionaires, and he was way out of his league and couldn't afford, like what they just did so automatically to go away on this retreat to this island and whatever, they were going to live this life. And he didn't have the money to do that, but he was invited, and he had to figure it out, because he knew that being around those people was going to be worth, so much for his future. And you get around people. I've got a buddy named Chaz Wilson. Chaz wrote a book called 5+1, and the 5 is really the 5 people that you're around the most that impact you. Use that same concept. But he said, when I realized that I was looking up to authors, these, Ogmandinos and these people that I was reading about, and I'm looking up to them. And then eventually I started calling people and going, hey, can we have lunch? And they were normal human beings and they'd have lunch with me. But suddenly my social circle was these people I admired, and my life had already changed and elevated by the very nature of the people that I was hanging around.
So true.
Right. So I think, if there is a self-improvement movement that's still going on, I mean, I can go back and trace the roots to the earliest days. And of course, we went through the EST and Life Springs and the deeper work, the landmark forum. I mean, there's a lot of things that went into that. And now I think it crosses over from straight personal development into spiritualism. There's a lot of things around that have kind of blended in. But I truly know that it is about our evolution, and enlightenment is a word that gets used. And we think of that as a spirituality, and so something that comes from being in a monkery and being on the top of a mountain, but it's not. It's the evolution of the greatest we can be, and seeing who we really are, not who we are living now. Like, who were we born to be? I mean, Bob Proctor, I think his book was, if I remember correctly, was You Were Born to Be Rich. We were born into pure abundance. And then everything else we learned from family. I mean, I wasn't raised in a family where we learned abundance. I was taught the opposite of abundance. Robbing Peter to pay Paul, getting by. Rohn used to phrase the too much month at the end of the money. That's a great phrase for it. But I mean, I was in that world where that was my reality. So I was born into greatness. That's what God intended, but that's not the way I was living. So I think when we start to wake up and go, wait a minute, I have a say-so in this. Wait a minute, I can take charge of this. Wait a minute, there are controllables that are within my reach. There are uncontrollables out of my reach. But you know what? The economy has nothing to do with my economy. Right? I mean, there's nothing, they're not in the same ballpark. Mm-hmm. This is for me to take hold and grasp and say, this is what I will have. I'm declaring it. What they decide to do as a group, that's up to them. You can buy into that stuff.
So Don, for this question, real quick, what was the beginning of the movement called originally? I heard you say something before in another show. It was about, it had a different name to it.
They did. They had the word for it was, oh my gosh. Yeah. It's when the early days when even Think and Grow Rich era, and actually the Success magazine, which is now 126 years old. So imagine 1897, I think was the year. What was it called?
Yeah, the guy wrote the book, The Science of Getting Rich. It was like early 1900s.
Waddles. Yeah, Waddles.
Yeah, Waddles.
I'm so sorry. I can't think of it, Dr. Finance. I'd love to give it to you. I remember using that and talking about that because at the time I was president of Success, and I was talking about that all the time. But it was something. It wasn't positive. It wasn't positive attitude. Positive mental attitude, PMA, came many years later. But in those early days, it was almost like science. Yeah. It was almost like science. It was this weird mystical stuff. And that's how it was looked at. It, alchemy. You read a book like The Alchemist with Coelho, and you start to realize that we create. We manufacture stuff. And of course, not taking anything away from God, but we co-create. We're here on the planet Earth. We're living in the third dimension, and here our actions and our decisions and our thinking lead to results.
You can say, if you take that approach, you can say like Newton really was, you can go way back for the beginning of the self-help movement. Newton was an alchemist, right? Like, they were all alchemists. They were all thinking like this kind of stuff. They weren't writing about it. He was writing his formulas and all that stuff for trigonometry, which was the birth of trigonometry.
Right.
But calculus, but like he was also on the side doing all this other stuff, because that's what the alchemists were doing. They were thinking about ways of thinking differently.
You know, I'm going to say one more thing about this movement or this thing that you asked about the movement. I'll tell you this, because philosophically, there's an element of this, which is like, I've talked about even my evolution through Rohn. At first, my first thoughts were I need to get rich. And eventually it turns into something different, which is I want more for other people. And, Ziegler said, you help enough other people get what they want and you get whatever you want, right? So there's some intelligent ways to do that. But I think if you really look at today, for example, let's talk about where technology has taken us. 40 years ago, almost, in this year, I think it's 40 years ago now, the internet was born. And so, I remember people talking about the fad. This is a fad. I mean, what is this? I mean, that's no big deal. And now, of course, there are people 30 some years old who could not imagine a life without having the internet. How did you get along? We used to have a map book. We had to turn to the right page and read get the cross hairs for, the map place I wanted to go, and from this page to that page. And now we just take our little phones out and we've got control of a whole bunch of the world right here. So there's an evolution to it. But if you don't have philosophy to go along with it, then all of it is dangerous. Because if you think about it, we've got the dark web going on just while we've got the great web going on.
Mm.
So what happens with any advancement is there's advancement into the negative and into the positive, and it's our here and our hearts and our heads that are going to run that and decide what's our version of that.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So your philosophy is key. And, delving into the greatness of who you really are, to me, is the evolution of your own, certainly your mind, your heart, and I would say your soul. I mean, I think it goes that far. So that's a different discussion. It would take a lot longer than we've got today.
Yeah. So Don, my next question ties right to this. This is, you brought up a couple points about, especially my own background. A lot of people, I've got alphabet soup after my name and designation certifications, and I actually earned my degree, all that stuff. What makes me different, I think, well, let me ask this question first and I'll get to that. So what do you think the self-development movement, why do you think this movement walked a different trajectory than the path of the traditional academics? Now, I want to preface this question, okay? So what I found from studying all these self-help guys, and I didn't enter this world until about 2.5 years ago. Other than Think and Grow Rich a long time ago, I didn't know about any of these players. I was totally in the academic world and on the field of finance. But what I found is, it seems to me that somewhere the self-help movement or personal development, whatever you want to call it, is going this way, and academics is going this way. They never really took the same course. And the more I think about it, I always come back to money. I think I was thinking about this recently, and I said, you know what, maybe they never connected because it's against the thought process of academics. They're the competitors. They don't want people to know about personal development or any of their advancements, because if they do, that money will be going not to universities, it'll be going outside that industry to this whole new movement. So we want to suppress them. We don't want them to be even known. Let's pretend they don't exist. And for 150 years, however long you want to say the official version of this personal development, that's whatever you want to call it, movement, has been going on for. I know from finance, I never heard about any of these books. Even Think and Grow Rich is not in any of the textbooks that I've read. And I have probably hundreds or thousands of them from teaching for 10 years, 6 universities. I never seen them. So again, going back to the question, why do you think the self-help or self-development movement walked a different trajectory than the path of traditional academics? Sorry, one last quick footnote here. So I think what makes me different in this world is that in this world, self-help is because I'm one of the odd ones that actually got to go all the way to the top and teach at that level for a long time. So I have my foot in both worlds.
You crossed
I know
over.
what it's like, right?
Yeah.
And I also know what this world's like. And what's interesting, I was an online professor. All my degrees in education beyond undergrad was it was called distant learning before online teaching. I got my master's degree and all my designations from the American College. They were one of the oldest distant learning educations out there. They would send me textbooks, and then I go take an exam somewhere because I didn't like the traditional model. I already had my opportunity now. I could work and do school at the same time. That's why I stayed in online teaching. I was an online student. I got my degree online, the doctor's degree after the master's degree, right? Like all that 20-year period was just online, which was kind of like a self-development, but yet I'm hanging in institutions. So having both foot in both of these worlds, the conclusion I just gave you was based on all this experience and you being a guru in this world. I mean, what do you think? Would you agree with everything I said? Do you think it's just against their grain to talk about each other? Because we could flip the argument. The people in self-help movement, they never talk about academics. Like I know, right? Like the law of attraction, I talked to Dr. Joe Vitale about this. They don't even want to mention like, any of the gurus in psychology, like Sigmund Freud, who's a great guy. I mean, his arguments were off, but listen, science is all about building on top of each other. I think we need to respect both parties. I don't know. What do you think?
Wow, it's an interesting question. It leads me to all kinds of conversations around education the way it is, and of course, the deeper education, the advanced education is really fascinating. I think I definitely think there's an academic look at this unproven mindset stuff. It's like it's flighty. It's almost like saying, yeah, go over there with your woo-woo stuff, and we're over here with the real stuff, right?
For 100+ years.
Well, more than that, right? Yeah, yes. But I think what is evolving now is when I look at the professors that are teaching business who have, are driving up in their Ferraris because they've come out of business and they're teaching real practice as opposed to being the academic who was learning by the books. I think it's all evolving dramatically. And I think that you're going to see more and more. I predict, and again, this doesn't matter in my world. I just see it happening. I predict that the universities have been known for their high education will become less and less. It's more of a status symbol than it is a reality, because I think there's places where people are going to be able to find that information in ways and move faster than traditional education. And of course, that's at the highest levels of education. When we go to the lowest levels of education, just, grade school and all that, preparing us for that future, I think we're less and less equipped. And I think that we've got to question education. I was laughing the other day and saying now that ChatGPT and all the AI stuff and 1,000 new AI tools were released last week, right? And when you start thinking about that and you go, so what is it I'm learning anymore? Because this is going to do so much of that for me. Now I have to think critically. I have to critically think. I have to learn how to think. But when was the last time anybody, had to do a math problem in longhand? What was the last, like, traditional things that have been taught the way they've always been are going to be less and less meaningful. And this evolution is going to be, now we have time for other, more lifestyle, more, what do I really want to know? What makes life worth living? Not how do I get through my education and get my A's and B's and get out of school.
So in other words, you're saying the self-development movement will be the king at some point, and the universities will be maybe not gone, but will definitely
not gone. I think there's a lot of people questioning why they're spending, $150,000, $200,000 on an education when that same money put into a different style of education would have them way in a different place. Doesn't change. If I want to be a scientist, I can't get that any other place.
Right.
So there's certain educational levels that I'm going to have to get from people that have been studying and are devoted to that. But I think for most lifestyle educations, teaching credentials and things like that, I think there's going to be a whole new way of doing things. It's going to press our systems. It is going to push everything in our society this question is going to push everything in our society, I believe.
If you're daring enough, we can take this conversation one step level. And what do you think that the future would be like in, I don't know, 3 years with AI at full capacity? If you want, we don't have to answer that.
Yeah, it's purely speculative. I'm not that smart. I never went to college, as you know, so I'm not that smart. But I certainly have feelings that that what I said just now is we're going to need to learn critical thinking more than we're going to learn how to do things. We need to have things done.
Yeah.
And the reality is, at some level in business, I don't know how to do certain things that I would deem, and again, not to there are certain things I don't know how to do that I don't want to know how to do. I don't want to have to do my own paperwork and stuff. I mean, there's elevations of levels of leverage, and other people are leveraged. Do you know how much leverage I get from AI? I mean, I just told one of my business colleagues that I actually coach, and I just said, think of it. You just got 6 new employees. You got to figure out what you want them to do for you. And he said, what's 6 employees? I said, it's called AI. I don't know which ones you're going to be using, but I guarantee there's people here, or there's technology here that's going to represent 6 people, but you still got to ask the right questions. You still have to give it the right assignments. You still have to know what you want. You still got to have the master plan. But that's what you just got. And I believe that people don't yet catch up with it. This is now the current fad that people are talking about. I'm like, it ain't a fad. This is the way it's going. And I forget who it was that was telling me just now that, this last week or two, that Amazon has just built a plant, much like Tesla just built in Austin, like 2 million square feet. And all of it is robotics. And there's 3 ships of robotics that take themselves to sleep, go put them into the charging stations, come out when it's time, and run things like this. 2 million square feet of plant is mostly not human.
That's nuts.
So what does that do for society? And when people say, well, they're taking my jobs, I'm like, you're not educating yourself and putting yourself in a place for success. What does success look like? It's not what you did. This is not your dad's Oldsmobile. This is a different era, and this is a different time. You better be up to date. And that's mostly going to happen at a self-improvement level, to your question, to answer your question.
Don, I have, going back to your book, and I'm sorry, I'll cut this conversation short in just a bit. Going back to your book, I have a great idea for us if you're interested, and we can go and partner up with maybe Don Green's the Point Hill Foundation, and write a book about the intersection between these 2 worlds and the future of education. Because I mean, think about it, the Point Hill represents is the face, even beyond Tony Robbins, of that movement. Right. And then we can talk about it from the academic side and where that path is colliding. I mean, that's could be a super cool little dissection analysis like this.
Interesting.
All right, Don. So thank you so much. The next questions I have, let's figure about 1 minute each so we can make reasonable time with this. These are easy, by the way. I hit you with that was a great deep conversation. You had a great answer. By the way, I hit you with the question of all questions, right? Other than asking, what is the purpose of life, right? That was like the question of all questions these days. And you answered it pretty good, very good, in like 2 minutes. So that was awesome. These are a lot more easier to know. About Success Magazine, if you can give us just maybe like a quick overview of the magazine, the history, stuff like that. So
Success is an amazing story. To go back to Tony Robbins and I, this is one thing we did do back in the Jim Rohn days. We literally were waiting for that magazine to come because, I think back, we didn't have, you didn't walk into a bookstore and have aisles of self-improvement and aisles of personal development stuff. You just didn't. And so the magazine, Success Magazine, which was again built in 1897, I think was when it was started, it was our Bible. I don't mean that in a biblical sense. I mean, it was our business Bible, if you will. And we couldn't wait for it to arrive. Like, couldn't wait.
Oh, so, that was what people read before, like all these books came out.
Yeah, because if you think about back to that time, I mean, there was Think and Grow Rich. There was a few books. Og Mandino, there's some Norman Vincent Peale. These guys had some books, but we didn't have shelves of them. Now everybody's got a book, and you want me to have 5 books, and you needed 5 books. And I mean, you think about it, everybody's writing a book, right? It's part of personal branding, marketing. It's probably a lot more of that than it is that I'm brilliant at something that somebody else isn't. Which at that time it was like there were thought leaders. And we have them today for sure.
Oh, was it called Thought? Something Thought.
Yes, it was New Thought.
New Thought. All right. I knew we had to get it. I wanted to get it recorded. New Thought was the name.
Between two of us, we thought of it. How about that? 2 brains made up one. Yeah, New Thought. That was the movement back in the 80s, the 1800s. Sorry, New Thought. But I think the biggest deal now, and I lost my way on that New Thought thing. I got another New Thought.
No, Success Magazine. I mean, there really wasn't any competitors, right?
Yeah, there was no competitor for it, for sure. And it ironically, it's had its ups and downs. It hasn't been always successful. Yeah. And but in the hands now, it's in EXP World Holdings owns it. It's in great hands now. I got to steward it for about 1.5 years. Jarek Robbins is there now. And it's in great hands. It's going to be big, and it's going to be what it always should have been, which is more than just a magazine. Because again, magazines are kind of on they're dying off a little more, and that's evolving. And there's so much more content, so it's turned into coaching and franchises and all kinds of interesting things. It's a beautiful publication and an incredible, iconic story. Mm. Yeah.
So you were president of that magazine for what, 2 years?
Year and a quarter, 1.5 years.
1.5 years. What was it like the typical day as a president of Success Magazine?
A lot of it was learning, because we were just trying to figure out what was going to be next. Most of it was not about the magazine. Most of it was about trying to figure out what was next for the evolution of that company, because the Success brand, I mean, think about it, Success brand, success.com. Who has that? I mean, that's like, wow. Yeah, there were very few companies that could have done what Success had the chance to do through coaching, through Speakers Bureau, through now a co-work space that's got a coach inside each co-work space, Success Cafe. There's a lot of things going on with that. And of course, they're getting into health and so many things, going deeper into all the technology pieces in all the self-improvement things. We came up with a new success wheel, if you will, and developed a new version of what had been used in the past. And, all those things are getting played out now. So it was at one time very unidimensional. Now it's multidimensional, and it's going to get even crazier. So I think it's an incredible future for that entity. I won't call it a magazine anymore, because it's more than just that.
What do I got to do to get on the cover of it?
On the what? On the cover?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably. I'm telling you, Dr. Finance, that's a hefty lift, man. That
was a good answer. On the what?
Yeah. I used to get all the time people would call and say, can I get an article in there? I'm like, it's like, if you knew how much content was coming at them and how much was available to put in there, it's stunning. Everybody wants to be on the cover. Tony's been on 5 times now, 5 covers, right?
Wow.
Yeah. So in fact, it was fun, because when I became president and they wrote about me becoming president, that article was in the publication with Tony on the front cover.
Oh, wow.
I thought that was kind of a cool, it was accidental, but I thought it was pretty cool that that's the way it worked out.
I think it would be great if you were on the cover, because I mean,
yeah, I don't see that happening either, my friend, because it's a pretty monstrous impact you've got to have to even be considered. Mm. Yeah.
Thank you so much. All right, we're gonna pivot down into real estate. So why do you like real estate? Maybe 30 seconds to a minute.
Oh, I like real estate because real estate makes fortunes. I like real estate because real estate people give their all to help other people have the biggest asset in their life. And I love real estate because it's a tremendous business when you consider investment needed to produce a result. Like, there's very few things you can get into that will have the biggest return on investment as real estate will, as at least as a real estate agent. And of course, buying and selling real estate, owning, holding, almost every wealthy person is going to be, their assets are held in real estate. So it makes the world go round.
That's brilliant. Thank you. The next question, we're going to talk about Hobbs and Herder advertising. We've already covered that in the story, but if you can maybe add a few more things about that company and that experience you had, which was probably at least a third of your life, I imagine.
It was a big part of my life. It was a company that transformed an industry. It probably, I know a guy who, you may know the company called Send Out Cards. And when he was developing that, he said, we modeled it after what we heard from you. We were in a different industry. So we know we impacted a lot of people through that. It was a very powerful opportunity for us to not only bring personal branding, but it came through the filter of personal development. We didn't firewalk, we did board breaking, but imagine a room with 1,800 people breaking karate style board, or, karate style breaking boards, and the energy that was created. We transformed a lot of lives. And every single week, most days, I get somebody who will talk to me from the past and tell me, you changed my life. That event I went to changed my life. So I feel very fortunate for that. We had a moment in time. I had one with Jim Rohn. I had one with Hobbs Herder, and I believe we're seeing one right now with EXP Realty. And I call it like Camelot, just that moment in time when all things are where they're supposed to be. And it doesn't happen long. It's not forever. It's just, doesn't matter. It's the same company. It's like there's moments. And Hobbs Herder was one of those Camelots for me. It was like in that moment, we were invincible. We had people that loved working there. We had people that loved coming, taking part in our stuff. It was just, we were the movement, and that's something very special about that.
The Camelot, I like that analogy on Clubhouse. I feel sometimes that Tim's story was right. Like, he's like, this was designed for you. Like, like it's the right moment, the right time. And you figured out a way to get through it.
This is
It's not going to happen again, and it won't happen again if I go back a year and a half from now and if I tried to redo it. It had to happen exactly in that order, the way it works. So yeah, thank you, Don. I appreciate that. Next question is about, since we're talking about real estate, what was it like being Gary Keller's partner? So I know eventually you became his partner. Gary Keller, founder of Keller and Williams, folks, one of the biggest real estate companies out there.
Actually, still the largest single company in the world. Interesting guy, Gary. We were fly fishing buddies. We were friends for years. We grew up in the business together. We kind of grew our companies together. He too did an amazing job. Interesting guy, an introvert, and so a lot of Gary is not like, he's not the outbound guy that is wonderful and smiling and energetic and all that stuff. He's got a very different style, but he's brilliant, freaking brilliant. And I give Gary a lot of credit. He changed the world of real estate as well. His model, what they built, absolutely shifted the world of real estate, and I think all things have a beginning, a middle, and they come to an ending because there's something else that comes up. And I think that Gary, has got a big job ahead of him, because the future is not as bright for all the franchise organizations. I would say this is true of most franchise organizations, period, but in real estate for sure.
Which leads to the next question: why EXP? You're on to this EXP thing. I'll probably be jumping ship soon myself. Why?
Yeah, it's a movement. I just, the day I thought I met Glenn Sanford, I found out later that he had been to one of my programs back in 2006, the founder of the company. But the day I met him, I said to him, this isn't growth that I've ever seen. I've watched every large company from Century 21 on. I've watched them all from their inceptions. Nothing has ever happened like this. It's a movement, and it's growing because agents feel like it's something that they own. Nobody's ever given agents ownership. You can be at any company, Coldwell Banker. I'm not knocking anybody. You can be wherever you are and be there 12 years, and 12 years later, you still own none of it. You still don't have anything to show for it except your own little practice. In this company, you own a part of the company. And it's creating fortunes. In fact, I just saw an article the other day that says EXP paid out $245 million in sharing of revenues and also in stock that they gave the agents last year. 245 million. Agents have never had that kind of liquidity and money and wealth building quality. And there's never a future for a realtor except the one they create for themselves. And this company, the company's creating it with you, for you.
Can you break that down, Don, for like someone who's about to jump as an agent? Like what, and you don't have to get held to this because of course there's contracts and stuff that people have to sign, but like what's the general compensation structure look like? I believe it's 20% up to 16,000. And then how do you get paid on the people you bring in as well? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, so there's a revenue component to it where you get paid to help. I actually refer to it as compensation for contribution. And it really comes down to when you help grow the company gives you access to the dollars on the people that came into the company through you. And it pays down 7 levels. And so we have business partners instead of peers. We have business partners. And so it's a very different ball game because we take ownership. And I noticed early on, Dr. Finance, I noticed early on that there was a big collaboration that I'd never seen. In most companies, agents are competing with each other. And in this one, sure, there's an element of that, but your success is part of my company.
All right.
So there's a collaboration and we can do things together that I've never seen anywhere else. So you have stock that you're getting for doing things that you did anywhere else. You're getting a share of the revenue should you choose to help the company grow. You've got health benefits available to you. You've got things that's not normal in real estate. You've got various revenue streams, and in real estate, most agents have one way of making money. I work with buyers, work with sellers, and I help them do transactions. In our company, you have like 7, 8, 9, 10 ways of making money, all of which are legal and within the confines, of course, of this real estate company. So Glenn really saw a way to make it something that was important for the agents. And he said, I wanted to build a company that I wanted to be part of. I wanted to build a company nobody ever built before that I was looking for. And I think that this company is all of that. So this is the game changer. Everything that's coming out new is a copycat of that, which is okay. I mean, in the past, what were all the companies? Copycats of something else. And so this is the trendsetter. This is the game changer. This is, we call it one big fire. This is the movement that's created, that's changing the real estate space and actually making people in the franchise world kind of fearful because they don't have an answer for the growth that's going on. This company, when Allison joined, just to put it in perspective real quickly, I'll finish on that. Allison joined 8 years ago, almost like a few months short of 8 years ago. She was agent 641. We're over 88,000 people now.
Wow.
Now, no real estate company's ever done that before. And by the way, highly productive. Number 1 in deal count for last year, number 1 in the world for deal count, meaning we're doing deals. There is production. This company is knocking out of the park. The biggest agents are coming here because they can make more doing what they did anywhere else. And that's why they're coming.
And to make more, again, to clarify, it's 20% up to like 16 grand or something like that.
Yeah, there's a cap of $16,000 that you pay into the company. And after that, you're at 100% commission. So
if I had somebody that I brought in as I sponsored them, how do I make money off of that person? Do you know, like, let's say they sold 100,000 in real estate, for example. I'm not going to hold you to this, but like just a general process.
It's not quite that simple, but there's a formula to it. You have a certain percentage off each level until they get to a cap, and it adds up. I'll say this: the big picture on that is the reason that there's 60 of us living in Puerto Rico right now, and we've all moved down here because of the tax advantages, is because the income streams have become so large, and we've got people making 7 figures a month.
Wow,
that's never been seen. In fact, there's company heads of huge real estate companies that don't make as much as some of our agents.
So your Puerto Rico clan is a lot of EXP people.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of great people here in Puerto Rico that have come for the same reasons, but they're not in EXP. But we have 60 of our EXP people that have grown such organizations that their income streams were such that 4% tax made sense over 40% tax.
Thank you, Don. What's the benefit for brokers? A broker coming into EXP?
They just have a lot more tools and things that they can't afford. Generally speaking, a small brokerage is a very tough position to be in because there's no reason for anybody to join a small brokerage. They just don't have the tools, the technology, all the stuff to compete with any of the big boys, let alone, and this doesn't make them buy a franchise. They just get to bring their people over, fold in, keep their company name, and become part of it.
And if there's a future for them if they go with EXP, if a family business dies, you were saying it's done. Like once it's done, once the breadwinner, the broker dies, it's gone. Here, you actually get to retain equity, which can be used for your legacy, for your
yeah, absolutely. It's all willable. I mean, whatever we build is willable. So it's pretty amazing. I see families that I know are impacted at least 3 or 4 generations alone with the income coming in. But when you consider the purchase power and what that's buying, we've created families that will have legacy for generations. I mean, generations.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Don. And last question in regards to real estate is history of real estate brokerage companies. Can you walk through that, starting from, like, let's say Coldwell Banker, maybe 30 seconds? How did that happen again? You remember?
Well, Coldwell Banker, goes back a ways, but there's a lot of them. I think the big movement in real estate happened when Century 21 became the first franchise organization of its kind, and they moved an industry.
When was that?
The 70s, 73, 74, something like that, 72. And up to then it was mom and pops, primarily mom and pops. And, we had our own real estate company. It was called, Don Real Estate or whatever. And we did our thing. And that franchising world began to change things. And of course, Remax joined soon after, Red Carpet. There's a lot of them, ERA. The model was that, and then everybody said, well, instead of being mom and pop and by ourselves, we can buy these tools and have this conglomerate technology and marketing budgets and all that stuff and recruit to something. And so they started seeing organizations go from 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people to 50, 60, 80, 100 people. Keller Williams came along and showed you how to do it, and with hundreds of people in an office. And that's been the quick story. And of course, EXP has no offices. It's built for the modern times. In fact, funny enough, to finish that, when COVID hit, not there was anything funny about COVID, but when COVID hit, most real estate companies came to a complete standstill. And literally, I asked people in the company, what has changed for you today, the day after COVID closed the world down? What's changed for you? And they said, we're operating exactly as we did yesterday. So we were built for something that nobody could foresee, but we're built for the future. And that's why we're growing like a weed.
And the trend since Century 21, the EXP, just to wrap this up, has been lower cost, more benefit to agent, until we get to EXP. And now we're more benefit to agent, virtual, and a cap almost basically 100% after like 16 grand or something like that.
Almost 100%. Yep.
So yeah, that's amazing.
Yep. It's a great story. It's a great story.
Thank you, Don. I appreciate that. And how do you deal with family that are negative about your future business plan, especially if you got a new idea that you want to try to sell them on, or you want to do your thing, and then family, is always can be in the background telling you that's too crazy of an idea.
Get a job, man. Get a job.
Yeah. Resisting change. Because I heard your story that happened when you were younger, your mom, and
my mom's in the hospital. My mom's in the hospital today, by the way. She just went in last night. She's having a little challenge. So I want to send out love to her today. But what I'd say is that it got me to Jim Rohn's to program.
Yeah.
But when I joined, one of the first things that I noticed was she was holding on to her values around safety and security, and you need a job. And when times got tough for me, she was like, you need to get a job. And I just knew intuitively that this was my chance to build something for myself, and that I was at a place where I had very little in the way of commitments. I didn't have kids, and I didn't have all that stuff that goes along with it to say I owe anybody anything, and I could just stay and and stay the course and fail until I didn't. And most people come through their own filters of what's safe and secure and what having a job means. I just saw yesterday a guy at 100 years old just had 84 years with the same company, and he was given some award. So he started when he was 16. That's an old model, not what you see today. And she, but now, by the way, she supports it and loves it and is amazed at all that I've done and all that stuff. But she couldn't see it because in her way of thinking, I needed to do something more secure, something I could count on. And what I realized was I can count on me the same way as anybody watching this, listening to this can count on you. You know, it's really your thing. So when you get around that, I think the deal is be measured with how much time you allow for people that are pouring on you. Allison calls them the crabs. You know, you've probably heard the old story of the crabs in a bucket, and no crab can get out because the crabs pull the other crabs back in.
Yeah.
Nobody wants you to leave the nest. Nobody wants you to leave them. Nobody wants you to leave and show them as being less than they could be, because you're succeeding means I could do it too, but I'm satisfied where I am. And so a lot of times we don't want those around us to leave us to go fly. And so it's easier to say, no, stay here, do this, do it the way we've always done it.
Yeah, because if those people take off, then like that's another challenge for the folks that are content. How do I deal with this person who's successful?
Totally.
Right?
Yeah, totally.
Thank you, Don. Appreciate that. Don, next question. Is it better to be a creator or a competitor?
A creator or a competitor?
Yeah. So creating something versus competing with people. See, if you're a creator, you're never a competitor because there's no competition.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. I love being on the creator side. What I would say is in competition, you know, if you've never read it, and anybody watching or listening needs to go get either of the two Blue Ocean strategy books. There's Blue Ocean Strategy, and then there was the newer version, and I forget what the piece was. It's the subtitle, but Blue Ocean is where nobody's playing. Red Ocean's where everybody's playing. And talking about sharks, these are where all the sharks are feeding and the water's red. Here's where the ocean's blue because there's nobody over here. And what you begin to realize is when you're a competitor, if you take an idea, like for example, we took marketing, Madison Avenue marketing. We weren't genius at creating marketing. We were genius at putting it into a place where it was had never been before. So do you need to be a competitor? I think you can find, is that a creator? Kind of, but I didn't have to create marketing. I had to create a new market for marketing. I had to create that. So when people think in terms of that, I would say, don't do what everybody else does, and don't say I can do a better job, so I'm going to do the same thing that's already been done by 57 other people. I'm going to go create a new way, and I'm going to go take technology. The advantage we have today is technology allows us to create differently than they could create 10 years ago or 15 or 20, 25 years ago. That's why the franchise world's suffering, because all those people have legacy franchises the way they've always been, and today you could do it differently. So, and I'm saying that generally speaking, I'm not picking on anybody in particular, but certainly in the real estate field, we've seen it.
Yeah, and the reason I thought you were perfect for that question, because if you listen to your story going all the way back, everything we talked about today, as you advanced, especially after Jim Rohn, you created a real estate training company. There was no competition, right? Like there were people that were popping up after you were created. Now they want to copy you. Right. But you just kept pushing and being different, and therefore they couldn't keep up with you, because when they caught up with you, you were already 10 steps in a different place. Right. And you saw that again with Keller Williams, like Gary Keller, as he was creating. You weren't the creator in that moment, but you were a part of that creation. And same with EXP. Here you go again. Like you have a knack for finding creators and locking arms with them, or being a creator yourself. Well,
thank you. I appreciate that. It's a great thought. I'm going to give credit to Allison on that one, because she found EXP and left Keller Williams when I was dead set against it. And Gary's partner going, "You're leaving what to go where?" Like, what? I was my mom going, "Come on, you need to stay secure in the company that's always been number one." And so she was right. So she gets full credit for that.
Thank you, Don. Appreciate that. All right, last question before we get into the wrap up of this session. Can one book I'm sorry, Clubhouse. Can you just give us a quick dissection of your Clubhouse experience, maybe in a minute or less? And by the way, you're going to be our main guest for the 2-year anniversary of the longest running room in Clubhouse. My whole journey on Clubhouse in the speaking world tomorrow night, folks, at April 28th, 2023, between 7 and 9 p.m. Eastern time, give or take. It's a 6-hour stage, but Don will be the main speaker, just really kicking off and celebrating that incredible moment for a lot of people in Clubhouse.
2 years, baby, 2 years. Congratulations. So when Clubhouse first took off, Dr. Finance, we built a room for success, and we had the Success Achievers Club every morning. Every morning we ran a 90-minute show. And, you know, I loved it. I loved every minute of it. I loved the fact that people could, especially during that era, because remember, this was fall of 2020, which means right in the heart of the pandemic, and people were stuck at home, and, you know, they were feeling stuck at home. I mean, they were feeling stuck. They were feeling less than. There was depression. There was, I mean, let's face it, we've got tons of psychological, drug, alcohol, like a lot of stuff came out of that time period because people didn't have people in their world. And I felt like we were able to contribute. I love the platform. I think it's terrific. And I love some of the changes they're making. It's just a great platform. Congratulations on your success. It's amazing what you've committed to. And now you've been doing it longer. I finally stepped out at like 15 months and went, I'm done.
But you had a room for 15 months?
Uh-huh.
Wow.
We had a room for a long time.
Every day, or what was it like?
Every 5 days a week, Monday through Friday.
Oh, that's what you were saying. And Tony Robbins, no wonder Tony Rodriguez, he does it 5 days a week. That's the reason for it, I guess. Huh?
That was our room. Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah. I think they changed the name. It was the Success Achievers Breakfast Club, Success Room, Success Achievers Club. And they've changed it.
Get Up and Grow now. Tony Get Up and Grow.
Yeah, that's his room. I don't know what that's his club, but anyway, whatever. It's the same group and the same leaders and the same stuff. We were real fortunate to find some great people. And Tony was the guy that got me into knowing about this thing called Clubhouse. I was like, what is that?
Yeah, he did that with Forbes Riley too. She was telling me he nominated her. Did he nominate you or something? Or?
No, somebody else did, but he was the one that told me about it. And I was like, yeah, whatever. And then somebody nominated me. I was like, okay, I'm hearing it from different people I respect and admire. I should probably look at it.
And then you were hooked. It was all over it today.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Don. Don, we're moving into temple questions. I've asked every single person who came on this podcast, from Stephen Covey to Les Brown. Very quick questions. We'll figure about 20 seconds each, and we can wrap it up.
Okay.
All right, Don, welcome back, folks. Don Hobbs here. We got an incredible episode. What a story today. We're going to do some template questions. First question, can one book change the world? Maybe 10 seconds.
The world? I'm going to say the world of personal development. It's one that matters. Think and Grow Rich was the granddaddy of all.
Yeah, so one book can definitely change the world, right? Absolutely. Okay, what role has networking played in your life?
Huge. The people you know, the relationships you have. The old phrase, your network is very closely related to your net worth. Absolute. And I think that, in fact, Allison's writing a book right now about that. And I think it's a huge part. You have to keep not your database, yes, but your close in circle. Who you hang around does matter for sure.
Is mentoring important? And who are some of your mentors?
Mentoring is really important. I've had several, Rohn, of course, being the biggest. My grandfather was a mentor in some life stuff. I had a spiritual leader, Esperanza Universal. She was amazing for me. My mom's been a mentor. She grew into her mentorship. Allison's a mentor for me, for sure. She's so wise. She's a great CEO of companies, and she runs all of our operations. Who else? I mean, Tony's been a mentor. Tony's been a great mentor. So yeah, mentorship is critical. In fact, I'm writing in a book right now with your friend, Eric Swanson. We're writing a book on mentorship, and I'm writing one of the chapters in that. It's really, to me, we should be mentors and we should be mentored.
See, Don, if you didn't show up on the stage that night, that opportunity might never have occurred. Imagine that. Like, it's all about being in the right place, right time.
We were already doing it, but yes, you're
Oh,
absolutely
you
right.
were? I'm sorry. Okay.
No, Eric and I go back a long ways.
All right. Thank you, Don. Appreciate you. So what are your favorite financial books?
You know what? A lot of the stuff, and I can't even tell you the titles because I pick up almost anything around him, is Warren Buffett books are my favorites. Just and Tony's book, I can't. It's upstairs, but the big thick, the money book. I think it's called
Money
Money
Mastery or something, I think.
Yeah, that amazing freaking book. I mean, really, like almost too deep in some ways for my taste, but I mean, opens so many possibilities.
I was actually shocked that he made that book because a lot of his other books were very, very simple. He really went deep with that.
He did.
All right, thank you, Don. Doing great. What are your favorite? I'm sorry, I just asked you. What are your favorite financial books? What's the next one? Do we need money to survive?
Well, I've been rich and I've been poor, but rich is way better. Money just, Rohn used to say all the time, money doesn't erase your problems. It just lets you get to your problems in style. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. Money doesn't solve problems. You are who you are. You'll experience life as you experience it. Money just makes some of the conveniences more available to you, but it gives you options.
I love that saying you just said. I'm sorry, I got stuck on that. As a money guy, it doesn't solve your problems, it lets you get your problems in style. That's so true, right? No matter what your vice is, you're going to do it better.
And by the way, the one thing I have become acutely aware of is money is an amplifier. It makes you more of what you already are, which means it doesn't change you for the better or for the worse. If you're bad and the way you show up in the world is that, it's going to give you options to be a hellion. If you're good, it's going to give you the ability to amplify what you can do and give. So
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I heard that directly we had Rami El-Batrawi here, a billionaire. He was one of our guests. And he said it is similar to you, accentuate your core. And here's a guy who, was Agnan Khashoggi, the richest guy in the world, a right-hand man at one point. So, when you get to that level, I mean, you're starting from zero, it's you see it all the way through. So thank you, Don. You're doing great. Is finance necessary for everyone? Now, the science of finance, is the science of finance necessary for everyone? Learning about how to manage your money, all that stuff.
Essential. It's a shame that it's never taught in school. This is where I think the schools and the system, and I'm not going to make some comment about how teachers aren't doing their job. I believe the system isn't set up to do the job that we need done, which is we need to have kids understand, and at a very early age, understand money, love it, respect it, know how to deal with it, know how to amplify it, know how to give it, all of it.
So it is taught in schools at the collegiate level. You're talking about high school and grade school, right?
I'm talking about grade school.
Oh, yeah. I'm with you on that. I mean, that's my mentor, Sharon Lecter. That was her whole mission about really financial literacy.
That's
why I locked arm with her.
He's awesome.
I agree with you. Thank you so much, Don. All right, 3 questions left. How important is having a purpose in business / what is your purpose?
My purpose is to touch the lives of the people that I have the influence with and that I get to touch every day. My purpose has always been to light people up and give them hope and to see a vision for themselves different from what they see. How important is purpose? It's only critical. It's only everything.
Thank you, Don. What would you like to accomplish in the next 10 years or so? Why?
We're going to build a very large real estate company, and the reason for it is we want to touch a lot of lives, and it's a ripple effect because I get to impact the people who impact the people, and I believe that it's a great mission. The next 10 years,
that would be with EXP, though, right?
Yep. Okay. Yep. Well, we've built a large company inside that company. And we've got Allison's just launching a platform that I think is amazing. That's going to be super cool. And my reach in books will be different, but certainly we'll get into that part. But I also know the influence I want to have through raising my platform up to be able to touch another couple million people before I get tired of doing this stuff. So far, I'm a little short of 2 million people, and I want to have 3 or 4 million people done before I'm done.
Followers or
No, touching lives, just
touching
really
lives?
being able to influence people and in touching lives, to be better, to have more, to accept their greatness.
How do you measure that though? How do you measure
Oh,
the
I
quantity?
don't, but I know if they've been in my room. I mean, I know that
Ah,
people are touched, they're moved, they can't walk out and be the same people,
that's right.
right? They can't.
100%. 100%. Okay, last question. What would you like to be your legacy to this world? And then we'll wrap up.
Wow, that you know, I look at how people in reverence look at what Jim Rohn did, and I go, there's nothing better than knowing that you touched millions of lives, and those people, that ripple is clear. That ripple is clear.
Mm-hmm.
So we can touch the world. We just can't do it all at once. We can touch the people who touch the people who touch the people. And I was able to do some of that with success. We still have a small role in some of that, which I'm laying out to be able to touch 2,000 to 3,000 coaches who touch people. And we're still doing that. And of course, we're building our own stuff. And all of that is designed for one thing: just help people get way better and live bigger lives. One of my big topics in my titles is Think Big, Live Big. And it's almost a 2-hour program I do, and it's phenomenal. And people, get tears, and I got tears teaching it. So it's very important that what we do is about helping others.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Don. I want to thank you for coming here today. I'm honored to have you here, man. I'm like that's why I really wanted to take the time with you, because I know that you just got a lot of incredible stuff to share with the world, and your experiences are just solid and point on and so strong. So I want to thank you for being here. Anything you want to say? This is the time. The floor is yours. Anything you want. The floor is yours, Don.
I'm going to share one last thing, and I hope we get a chance to do this, and it comes naturally. Thank you for setting this up so perfectly. But the ripple effect, and the one thing I want people to know, and as you're watching this or listening to this, I want you to really get that you are important. And what you do is important. And I don't mean like what you do for a job. I mean, what you do with what you have, what you do with your life, what you do matters, because everybody touches people. And again, we'll go back, Dr. Finance, to, we're either living our life as an example or as a warning. And there was a piece that was written many years ago by a very famous author. She actually ran for president. Her name is
Marianne Williamson.
Marianne Williamson. And she wrote a piece called Our Deepest Fear. And years ago, I found this piece, and I heard it was related to Nelson Mandela, and I found out later it was her piece. But it's called Our Deepest Fear, and I want to give it to everybody today and leave you with this thought, because what you do matters. Who you are is bigger than you know. Who you are is way bigger than you know. And what she said is our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we're powerful beyond measure. It's our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You're a child of God. Your playing small doesn't serve the world. Everything we do, right? Just get that. We're here to serve our light serves the world. I got away from myself there.
Marianne Williamson.
Yeah, Marianne. No. I'm trying to say, to pick it up where I was. But she says we are bigger than we know. And by the very permission that we give ourselves to share with others, we are giving people light. We're the light bearers. We're the people that are showing other people what Rohn said, living by example. We're the ones doing that. So go decide what impact you want to have. I don't care what your job is. I don't care who you are. I don't care how young you are or how old you are. It doesn't matter. Because it's not about that. It's about what impact do you want to have, and what legacy, what ripple of legacy do you want to leave? And by stepping into the fear, we show others it's possible for them. We give others permission to do the same. So that was all. I just wanted to share that with your listeners and your viewers, because I think that we all have more power than we know, and we play small. There's nothing enlightened about playing small. We were built as children of God, and whatever that means to you, however that shows up, I think we have a great responsibility. And here's the better part, a great opportunity to do something with that.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Don. And Don, where can they find out more information about your website, your social media?
Yeah, so donhobbs.com, you can go there. You can go to, of course, my social sites, the Real Don Hobbs. Look at me on Facebook. You'll find me easily on Facebook. I was mentioning, talk about fear, or deepest fear, my fear of dancing. And I just did a post a couple of weeks ago, or a week and a half ago, that you got to go see Don dance. Okay. You just got to take and read the story, because that story is pretty fun. And I hadn't ever shared it before. And so I wanted to kind of come clean with what happened and how I broke through fear and what I did and what it did for me.
You're on Instagram and Twitter too?
I don't do Twitter. I play in Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Yeah. I'm in Twitter, but I never look. I just tell people you can't be a genius at all things, and that's one I'm never going to be a genius on.
All right. Well, thank you, Don. Folks, if you're listening to 1,000 years from the future, you missed out. But if you're here listening to it today, he's actually coming on Clubhouse for free masterclass. I hold them free every Friday for 2 years now. April 28th. Between 7 and 9 p.m. Eastern time. This is a 2-year anniversary of the longest running room on Clubhouse, impacting my latest calculations over 2 million people in 84 days. I started on a Friday with 12 people in the room. We built it to 500 people, which is equivalent to about 10,000 or plus that went through that room over a 10-hour time frame. Woke up the next day and the room was still going, and they went for the record. I'm like, why are you guys, the room is still going? And ever since then, every Friday, I brought a main guest on. Laura Langmeyer was the next week, and it just kept going. Les Brown, you name it. And Don's going to represent the 2-year anniversary. And that's over 100 guests, at least. Something way more than this podcast. Well, thank you, Don. I appreciate you, folks. Don't forget to follow Don's website and follow him on social media. Follow all my stuff too. And if you want to learn more about what I'm doing, drfinance.info. I want to post this website on YouTube. We're going to blast out the 20 plus major podcast directories. Going big, folks. And if you want to learn about finance, the necessity of finance, I wrote this book for my finance students over 10 years ago in the universities. My next book, The Most Important Lessons in Economics and Finance. And then finally, The Survival of the Richest, put all my conclusions together in a 500 plus page book, marrying survival, finance, economics, biology, sciences of all sorts, greatest arguments, and saving the world in one big thing to give you a headache. So with that said, thank you, Don. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Don, if you could wait for me.
Dr. Finance, thank you, man. Appreciate you so much.
Appreciate you. I can't wait to be
part of this.
Tomorrow. Honored here. And yeah, if you just hold on 1 second, Don, we're going to conclude out. Thanks, folks. We'll see you on the next episode. Don't forget to follow, like, subscribe, and comment. And this is great. 101 episodes coming up, folks. Thank you.